Good evening, everybody. We were kind of waiting for John Franklin. I think he's almost here, but we'll go ahead and start, and then he'll come in shortly. So I'm going to call our meeting to order. And before I get our roll call, I wanted to wish our city of Vista happy 57th birthday today. So it's our city's birthday today. Yay! It's actually much younger than I am. So we'll have a roll call with Kathy Valdez, our city clerk.
The record shall reflect that all members are present, with the exception of Deputy Mayor Franklin.
And we're going to have a pledge of allegiance led by our council member Contreras this afternoon, evening. What day is today? All right, ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In accordance with the Brown Act, and here comes John. In accordance with the Brown Act, I'd like to announce that as a result of convening simultaneous meetings, the members of the Buena Sanitation District will receive compensation of $147.75 for the district meeting pursuant to Buena Sanitation District Ordinance 2000-6-1. I'd like to remind everyone that the Vista Municipal Code requires members of the public to observe order and decorum at the meeting and to conduct themselves in a courteous manner. The ordinance was adopted to allow for the public input and to facilitate city business without disruption of our meeting. Applause is appropriate for the items listed under the presentation portion of the agenda only, and attendees should remain seated during the meeting. Persons needing to stand are requested to step outside the City Council chambers where video and audio of the meeting are playing. This is also listed on our agenda cover sheet. Students, are there any students here today? Yeah, a lot of them. Okay. Students wishing to receive credit for attending this evening's meeting must stay for a minimum of 1 hour. However, we ask that you stay for the completion of an item rather than leaving in the middle of a discussion. When you're ready to leave, you can ask one of the sheriff deputies or a staff member in the back of the room to sign your paper. To speak on an item on the agenda, please fill out a speaker slip with the number of the item you want to speak on and give it to the city clerk secretary. Speaker slips are available just outside the council chambers, I believe on the table out there. So with that, we'll get the approval of our agenda by our city manager, Patrick Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. There are no changes this evening.
Okay, with the following recommendations on the recommendations on the following consent calendar, which are C1 through C4, will be enacted in one motion unless an item is removed from the calendar. Any member of the public can remove an item by submitting a request to speak card to the clerk's secretary. Items removed from the consent calendar will be considered immediately following adoption of the calendar. We have the 4 consent items, and do I have anyone? Does anybody want to pull anything from consent? Councilmember Green.
I just move that we approve the consent calendar as presented.
Okay, do I have a second? Second. Okay, if I have a second, please cast your votes. That motion passes unanimously. That brings us to our public hearings. There are 3 public hearings this evening. This is the next public hearing 1 is a public hearing regarding application filing and permitting fees for cannabis businesses. The public hearing is now open. Assistant City Manager Ellie Zimmerman is going to introduce the item.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. So this is a public hearing, as indicated. The City Council adopted ordinances authorizing new cannabis uses at the December 10th City Council meeting. Those items that you took action on are before you on the slide. You authorized testing uses, 2 manufacturing facilities, 2 distribution facilities, and delivery within the city. And so this public hearing is to establish fees that would be applicable for the processing of those permits, as well as the processing of the required cannabis employee work permits, and then finally authorizing the city to accept the live scan results from the Department of Justice for all employees of cannabis businesses. Fees are established by multiplying the estimated staff time to process the application by the average fully loaded hourly rate for the position or positions to be conducting the work. On the slide before you, you'll see the first proposed fee, which is to cover applications for businesses that collectively fall under the term cannabis enterprise licensing. These are the testing, manufacturing, and distribution facilities. For the cannabis enterprise license fee, the recommended fee rate is $4,318. Are there any questions about this fee?
I don't see any questions right now.
The second fee covers the cannabis delivery service license application filing fee. This would be applicable to applicants that would be either the approved Measure Z retailers that want to expand their allowance to include delivery, and any authorized legal delivery retailer from outside the city that is coming into the city to deliver. The fee that's recommended for this application is $978. Is there a question?
Councilmember Breen?
Yeah, my question is, would the establishment have to pay that fee every year, or is that just the startup fee for it?
This is a single one-time your permit fee. Any renewals would be not this. This
Okay.
is the filing fee with all the stuff you have to do initially.
So just saying, hey, we're switching to delivery, we pay this one time, and then...
We're adding delivery. For Measure Z businesses, we'd be adding delivery.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
I don't
And then
see any.
the final fee is for the employee work permit. This is a ministerial application process in the city clerk's office, and the recommended fee for that processing is $15. And then the staff recommendation, again, is to adopt the following fees and also authorize receipt of live scan results for the employees of the cannabis businesses. This completes my presentation, and I'm available to answer questions. Thank you.
Okay, I have speakers, so would you like to hear the speakers? Okay. So we'll start with Terry Pauly, and be followed by John Byram.
Hello, my name is Terry Pauly, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I have been a registered nurse for over 40 years. I'm a cannabis nurse navigator and have worked in the cannabis field for the last 3 years. I just got my live scan, and I do work for 4 hours a week at Dr. Green RX dispensary. I'm a member of the American Cannabis Nurses Association and the Cannabis Nurses Network, and my job is to educate the public about cannabis safety. While cannabis is not for everybody, I think that it's important that we have the opportunity, or patients have the opportunity, to make that decision themselves. And I just wanted to share with you, 44 years ago, my mom had breast cancer. She was seen at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, well-renowned clinic for cancer care. And her doctor recommended, back then, 44 years ago, that she smoke pot. She would never do that because it was illegal, and she didn't know where you would get safe cannabis. So that has really stayed with me over the many years. I don't smoke pot. I have never really participated in the recreational aspect of it, but I do use tinctures for a chronic disease that I have. And I'm grateful that Vista has allowed dispensaries. I live in Carlsbad. We have no dispensaries. And I work with a lot of seniors who are very interested in getting cannabis. They're afraid to go to the dispensaries, so we need to make them patient-friendly and provide education, and not make the fees so high that when they come in, they can't afford the medicine, because as you know, insurance covers nothing, whether you're taking it as a medicine or not. So I just wanted to thank you for your forward thinking and opening the dispensaries, and think about trying to not keep the costs so high so that all patients, or at least medical patients, can afford to come and shop there. Thank you.
Thank you. John Byram, followed by Erica Leary.
Hello, Mayor Ritter, council members. My name is John Byram, and I work for North Coastal Prevention Coalition. The mission of NCPC is to reduce the harm of alcohol, tobacco, marijuana, and other drugs in the cities of Oceanside, Carlsbad, and Vista through community action, education, support, and collaboration. I want to speak to you tonight about the safety of our youth. The California Bureau of Cannabis Control has very few agents in California, and they are not operating in the county of San Diego. There's no one monitoring any of these marijuana businesses. I think you have a chance to resolve this problem on a city level, and we can set an example for the rest of the county. The city of Vista has a tobacco licensure ordinance that charges a fee which is used to monitor tobacco retailers. The Sheriff's Department sends in decoys to see if the retailer sells tobacco products to individuals under the age of 21. While we aren't able to access the numbers of underage sales of tobacco products in Vista, I can tell you that the city of San Marcos number of underage sales in August of 2019, when they visited 49 stores, were 8 stores sold to minors. When I was young, I knew what store would sell me tobacco. I knew what store would sell me alcohol. And I for sure told all my friends. We don't want that to happen with marijuana in Vista. The licensure model could be used for marijuana businesses. I believe that this fee could be used to ensure that marijuana shops, and especially delivery services, are not selling to the youth of Vista. When you make decisions about marijuana businesses, please take into account how this decision will impact our youth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Erica Leary, followed by Becky Rapp.
Excuse me. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. My name is Erica Leary, and I'm the Program Manager for the North Coastal Prevention Coalition. So I'll try not to duplicate what you just heard from John, but just want to share a few facts and data and consideration points. 2019 California Healthy Kids Survey data that we get from our local school districts. This was the first time in over 20 years that I've been working in the prevention field that past 30-day use of marijuana by 11th graders was higher than that of alcohol in both Vista Unified and Oceanside Unified. And I know at a recent council meeting, Councilmember Rigby shared the SANDAG data report that showed that the juvenile offenders in our county report 100% tested positive for marijuana use, and only about 11% view marijuana as harmful. And we hear from students that we work with that not a day goes by when they're at school and they don't know a peer that's been vaping on campus or vaping before school or after school. So I'm not here with many opinions on your application fee structure, but I am here to encourage you and urge you to consider developing a comprehensive plan for enforcement and compliance. So as you do expand marijuana businesses in Vista, you have a tool and a method to ensure that the products are only sold to those appropriate to buy them. As John mentioned, the tobacco retail license could be a model for annual fees dedicated to enforcement. Perhaps in your delivery application, it spells out the consequences of suspensions and revocations if they're caught violating the conditions of their license. Perhaps that's a way you add additional oversight to the 11 dispensaries that were adopted through Measure Z, which took a lot of control away from the council. And then as you look to manufacturing, perhaps consider some of the things that other cities are doing in terms of the products. Many cities are prohibiting vaping sales. We have high potency and flavored THC cartridges being manufactured, and I don't know if that's what you really want here in Vista. So I just want to urge you to consider addressing this issue as you discuss this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Becky Rapp.
Good evening, my name is Becky Rapp. I'm a parent and community member representing the parent community who are deeply concerned with the negative impacts of marijuana dispensaries on our community and especially on our youth. We thank you for discussing processing fees for applications and employment permits, as this is a crucial part in educating and protecting our community. I would like to share with you the national and highly respected annual Monitoring the Future survey, which measures 8th, 10th, and 12th graders' lifetime, past year, and past month substance use. In addition to their attitudes about substance use, they released their findings in December, and I have a handout for you. Good news for teens, parents, families, and communities is the decline in use of prescription drugs, alcohol, and cigarette smoking. Bad news is the significant increase in vaping and marijuana use among teens. And here are a few of the disturbing findings just published. 12th graders past month, or within the last 30 days, vaping of marijuana almost doubled, rising from 7.5% to 14%, which is the second largest increase in any substance over a one-year period since the survey began in 1975. 30-day use for teens indicates addictive behavior. The California Department of Public Health just published updated statistics as well. California high school students were asked which they tried first, cigarettes or marijuana, and 64% said marijuana. It's crucial that the community, especially our teens, be educated on the risks of marijuana use. I would like to respectfully ask the City Council to direct our city staff to work with the school districts to understand the rates of marijuana use and vaping among Vista's youth, and provide a report to City Council. Perhaps any money collected through fees from marijuana applicants could be spent on a comprehensive education program for teens. It's only fair that marijuana businesses that advertise and commercialize marijuana use be required to pay a tax or fee equal to the consequences that follow. As parents, we hope that we all work together to make sure our youth know that this City Council does not support or endorse marijuana use by teens. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes all of our speakers. So I'm looking for council direction from council here on this. Councilmember Green.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for speaking. I definitely know that as a council, we 100% want to do all we can to protect our teens and our children in our community. If I'm not mistaken, there's not a lot of, we're not trying to generate funds for programs here. We're basically covering staff time, correct?
Correct. These fees are just to cover the staff time to process the initial application.
All right. And there's no, I mean, the taxation that we get from Measure Z is basically what our bread and butter is from a, like what we would use for programming and such, correct?
It could be, and as well, it's possible that we will be bringing back for your consideration fees for the regulatory audits, and so at that time, if there's a further discussion on abuse of the funds, we could discuss it, but that's coming a little bit further down the road.
Okay, and that has to do with the enforcement and compliance aspect?
Correct.
Okay, wonderful. No, I was worried, as far as if a young person came, a 25, 30-year-old person as a delivery driver, would they have to pay a huge fee in order to be employed with a dispensary as a delivery person? And I think the $15 an hour employee work permit is reasonable. The $9.78 licensing fee, I think the verbiage, one of the speakers spoke about, hey, if you're not in compliance with doing things the right way, you could lose the ability to deliver. I don't know if there's any type of stipulations we could write into that, or, since we're allowing new aspects of marijuana use, what type of consequences we could have when it comes to enforcement and compliance. And as far as that delivery fee goes, instead of making it one time forever, maybe every 3 years, they can renew it and submit us a list of approved employees that have already bought permits or something like that. I just want a little accountability, and I don't think they would be opposed to it.
If you're talking about the Measure Z approved businesses that would go potentially apply for the enhanced permission to deliver.
Yeah, the $9.78 fee.
Measure Z doesn't require any regulatory compliance audits. It does ask for an annual financial audit, but it doesn't have the other types of inspections that I know the City Council was concerned about implementing. However, the exchange that the City Council authorized in allowing the Measure Z businesses to deliver is that they would agree to quarterly audits.
Okay.
So
beautiful.
If they do want this privilege, they will get regular inspections.
Okay, and then is there a way to, like I said, I just think a carte blanche, one-time $9.78 fee to deliver marijuana in the city forever. I think they're going to be making a lot of money from the marijuana delivery aspect, and I don't know any other cities that have a fee for the marijuana delivery, but that might be another source of revenue. Once every 3 years, once every 4 years, once every 5 years, I don't know, but just saying you pay it once and you can be in business forever seems a little
So that's the initial fee to, if there's a change in your business type, if there's a change in your insurance indemnification, if any of the applicants or the work permits, the live scan results show something that's not allowed, the city will follow up and potentially it could go as far as revoking the permit.
Okay.
For our businesses in the city, again, there will be a fee we'll recommend to establish to do those quarterly inspections and the annual audit.
Okay.
So they will be seen regularly. And if there are issues that can't be done with a minor corrective action, then we'll move further up the scale like we do with any of our code enforcement or, for example, like a fire inspection type report.
So what you're saying is that this fee it's not practical to make this a recurring fee because it's more of an initial setup fee.
Correct.
So we'll have recurring fees that we may be able to capitalize on money for the city per se.
There will be additional fees that we'll be recommending to you.
Okay. Well, yeah, I like the work that you did, and I think that it's definitely reasonable. I look forward to hearing from my fellow council members.
So is there a business license fee every year? Like other businesses have a business license fee? Is that?
Yes, the business
that's
licenses are
separate from
required
this?
and it'll be based on their gross receipts.
Okay, so Deputy Mayor Rigby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think my colleague asked most of the questions I have on my list already. And then also the annual licensing fee versus this initial application fee. So when you were talking about the quarterly audits that will be happening, and we were talking about, and one of our speakers, and thank you for coming out and speaking, asked about enforcement and what were we doing to enforce. Will we be getting quarterly audit reports and enforcement reports given to City Council? Because I would like to get that information. I think that would be vital to have on a regular basis so that we can monitor the situation.
We can provide updates on a regular basis once we actually start doing the audits, yeah.
Of course. I don't want anybody in the audience here to think that this is something that the council as a whole or me personally supports. This is something that has been implemented by the people through Measure Z, the measure that was on the ballot. So we are doing the best that we can to create this, I don't even know the right word to use on this one, to create this industry within our city in the confines of Measure Z, but also in doing what we can to continue to protect our community. And that's a very fine line to walk, in my opinion. So I thank staff for doing a really good job on putting this together. But I always love to hear what our community has to say on this issue. So thank you for being here. With that, I would move that we approve staff's recommendation on these fees.
Councilmember Franklin.
I think to add on to what Councilwoman Rigby was saying, I think this measure to voluntarily authorize the additional businesses that would be sundry to the Measure Z businesses demonstrates the good faith of the council to implement the will of the voters in the city of Vista. Though this wasn't something that the council determined to do, the people determined to do it, we are upholding the will of the voters, and we are making full accommodation for needful accessory businesses that will serve the needs of the 11 Measure Z licensees. I would, in response to the speakers, like to request at a future council meeting that we have a public briefing on our city's efforts to ensure that marijuana is not being sold to minors in the same way that we have programs to ensure that tobacco and alcohol are not being sold to minors. I'd like to get a briefing and make the public aware of our enforcement activities there, because that's also very important. And with that, I would second the motion.
Kind of go along with that. Don't we have a program that supports the monitor? It was, I think the kids, there's a sheriff undercover, and they go to the local stores and try and buy things. I don't know the name of that program. You know, they monitor the alcohol and cigarette sales and things like that.
It's called a minor decoy program. It's a program that many jurisdictions throughout the state and country have. You can be implemented for both tobacco and alcohol sales.
And can the marijuana, can that be included into that program?
Currently, they're paid for by grant funding, but if it's something the City Council desires, we can look at options. But not we can't just slide it into the current program.
Oh, okay. Well, I think we should look at options for that. So, Councilmember Contreras.
You know what? I just wanted to clarify as far as the fees that we're discussing. So the fee structure is such that we can only charge what it actually takes, right, with staff time. So this is not an item where we can add additional fees, correct? Because it would be non-compliant with the law.
Correct. State law requires that a fee be established based on the reasonable time spent by the employee or employees that are doing the work. Based on actually the kind of refined process that we understood with processing the Measure Z applications, the departments that are involved let me know which employees and about how much time they expect each of these different types of licenses to take. We use those hourly rates to come up with the recommended fee, but no more.
Okay. Thank you. And I do agree with my colleagues as far as, we're going to be seeing some revenue trickle in coming from cannabis businesses. And I think it would be really fruitful for the council to review how we could use some of that for funding, for decoy or some kind of way for us to really address teen use. To make sure that we're doing all that we can to prevent an increase in that and to really decrease the amount of youth that are coming into contact with cannabis or using it. So I look forward to that discussion in the future. Thank you.
Councilmember Franklin.
If we can't do it tonight, I'd like to agendize that we authorize a letter on behalf of the City Council to our State Assemblywoman, to our State Senator, to the leaders of the legislature and the state senate, and ask them to change the law to allow the funds in that grant program to be used for cannabis minor enforcement, because that is a needful thing that they ought to do, and I think our city should lead the way with a letter asking them to do that.
Deputy Mayor Rigby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think I heard you at the end of your remarks ask, but when I was talking about enforcement, that's one of the items that I would expect to be included is minor enforcement that, minors aren't getting this. And I'm sure that our sheriff's captain would be happy to work with staff and with the council on that program and what it would look like. And you had said that the funding is not included for that particular type of program. So identifying areas where that funding could come from, I would like to see that as well. And I think Councilman Franklin's idea to engage our state legislature on some of these other issues is paramount, and I appreciate that.
The only other thing I would ask is on the flavored vaping, now the flavored things, I know some cities are looking at that. I don't know if I'm ready to ban that, but I'd like to sure look at it, because I know they're having some discussions regarding that. So the flavored, selling the capsules of the flavored vaping, and so I know that.
And I believe there's a bill that's been introduced this year to ban the flavored vaping on a statewide level. So we're following that. We'll see what happens, and if we need to do something specifically locally, we can bring back a recommendation.
Okay. All right. So we have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes. We close the public hearing, right? Yes. Just checking. That motion passes unanimously. That brings us to our second public hearing. This public hearing is to receive testimony regarding vacation of existing public utility and street easements and grant of new public utility easement at 211 Palm Drive. So the public hearing is now open. Community Development and Engineering Director John Conley is going to introduce the item.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Kim Cruz, our right-of-way agent, will be providing the staff presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. For your consideration this evening, staff presents two resolutions regarding easements at 211 Palm Drive. The first resolution is to vacate a public utility easement and a street easement. The small street easement is not in use and is not necessary for any future right-of-way. The public utility easement covers a much larger area than is needed by the utility companies and will be superseded by a new public utility easement, which takes us to the second resolution. This resolution is to grant a new public utility easement which covers the area where there are existing utility facilities. This concludes the staff presentation. Staff, as well as the applicant, are available to answer any questions you may have.
Councilmember Franklin. I don't have any public speakers, so Councilmember Franklin.
I think we've all been briefed on this issue, so I would move that we close the public hearing and approve the item proposed by staff.
Councilmember Green.
I just wanted to thank Kim Cruz for her work on this, and every time I walk past Kim Cruz's desk, she is standing up. So this is the first time I've ever seen Kim Cruz sit down. So she is a hardworking city employee, and I did want to thank you for putting this together, Kim. So with that, I will second Councilmember Franklin's motion.
Okay, seeing no further comments, please cast your votes. That motion passes unanimously. That brings us to our last public hearing. This public hearing has received testimony regarding a proposed street vacation at 760 Beverly Drive. Public hearing is now open, and Director Conley is going to introduce the item.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, Kim Cruz is going to present.
Yes, also for your consideration, staff presents a resolution to vacate a public street easement at 760 Beverly Drive. The city acquired this street easement in 1971 for the southerly extension of Beverly Drive to Vale Terrace Drive that was planned at the time. This street extension was never constructed and is no longer needed for future public right-of-way. This concludes the staff presentation, and staff as well as the property owner are available to answer any questions.
No public speakers. Deputy Mayor Rigby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think we've all been briefed on this. I think one of the comments that I had on this one was I think it might be a little bit overdue, so I'm glad we're doing it now. And with that, I would move that we close the public hearing and approve this vacation at 760 Beverly Drive.
Councilmember Franklin.
On behalf of all of us who have mistakenly turned down Beverly thinking they could get to Vale Terrace, I'll second that.
Okay, seeing no other comments, please cast your votes. That motion passes unanimously. Okay, that brings us to our first discussion item. It's a draft strategic plan to address homelessness. Our Assistant City Manager, Ali Zimmerman, is going to introduce the item.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening again. I'm going to start off by introducing Ms. Amanda Lee, who is to my right, and congratulating her on her recent promotion to Assistant to the City Manager. Amanda was our Housing Programs Manager for a couple of years, and she has been the staff person spearheading this project, so I wanted to make sure to acknowledge her recent promotion and good work. This discussion item is the culmination of almost 2 years of efforts to achieve one of the City Council's top goals for 2018 to 2020, which was the creation of a strategic plan to address homelessness. And I want to start by thanking you, Mayor and City Council members, for taking the time with us over many meetings to provide your feedback and direction, which has helped to shape this document. And I also want to recognize our consulting partners, Heidi Gantwerk and Julie Dubik with HD Consulting behind me. They took the lead to gather the information and input from city staff, the council, the community. They met with business leaders, social service providers, faith-based organizations. They researched best practices and created the framework for this draft plan. And throughout the process, we have appreciated all of the input we have received from our residents and business owners, faith-based organizations, and other members of the VISTA community. And finally, I do want to recognize, in addition to Ms. Lee, all of our city employees from departments that have taken part in helping us with this endeavor, and especially Amanda, who's been shepherding it since day one. Briefly, I did want to remind the council of all the formal meetings we had that led up to the consideration of this strategic plan. In June of last year, the City Council conducted a workshop on homelessness where we discussed federal, state, local issues, VISTA-specific issues, and what the Council's vision was from the big picture perspective for the strategic plan. And direction was given to staff to bring back information on homelessness prevention, quality of life and legislative advocacy, and homelessness reduction. And over the course of 3 meetings this fall, we discussed these outcomes in detail and received consensus direction from you regarding what to include in the strategic plan document. The draft plan before you tonight consists of the action items for which, by consensus, the City Council requested be included in the plan. A main component of the entire document is data gathering and evaluation metrics. Each action, while described on its own, is not meant to be standalone. The action items together comprise a holistic strategy for addressing this significant issue, and we anticipate that many will be implemented in conjunction with others. And lastly, it's our intention that this strategic plan not sit on a shelf, but rather serve as a roadmap for how the city addresses homelessness now and into the future. It should be a living document that's regularly reviewed and updated to address what's working, what's not working, what funding resources are available, and what new innovations are introduced over time. Simply put, when this plan is adopted, that won't be the last time you hear about it, but rather the first time that our efforts to address the community's needs are brought forward. As we move into the presentation tonight, I wanted to go over the outline for the discussion briefly. Following my comments, Ms. Lee will take the lead, beginning with a summary overview of each of the action items that will be presented for your consideration. And when she completes that overview, Mayor, I think that might be an appropriate time to pause for public speakers. And then after the public speakers, Ms. Lee is going to go through each action item individually to seek your direction for inclusion in a final document. And then we'll close the discussion with an update on next steps. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Lee to get started.
Hi, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. As Ms. Zimmerman has indicated, I will begin by providing a brief overview of the action items that are included in the draft strategic plan. The slide before you displays the programs and/or activities that are proposed for inclusion in the strategic plan. Each of the action items have been discussed at prior City Council meetings with the exception of the internal homelessness task force, which will be discussed shortly. At the September 24th City Council meeting, City Council discussed strategies to prevent homelessness, and City Council directed staff to include the Homelessness Prevention Pilot Program and Home Share Coordination Services in the strategic plan. As you are aware, in June 2019, the state adopted their fiscal year 2019-20 budget, which included a line item to provide VISTA with $250,000 to be used for homelessness prevention and intervention services. The Homelessness Prevention Pilot Program will utilize those state funds to contract with service providers to provide prevention services. These services include rental assistance, first and last month's rent or deposit, utility assistance, transportation assistance, hotel-motel vouchers for those with no significant barriers to permanent housing, case management, housing navigation, and other support services, as we've discussed. The program parameters are still to be negotiated. However, the program will include financial literacy component. The Home Share Coordination Services offer low-cost housing options for people of all ages, utilizing the existing housing stock. Participants can be older adults, working professionals, or students. However, the program primarily works with older adults who wish to continue living in their homes and communities. A provider will oversee leasing, conduct landlord outreach, match roommates, and provide conflict resolution. At the October 22nd City Council meeting, City Council discussed strategies to improve quality of life for all within the community. City Council directed staff to include the historic downtown daytime outreach program, encampment cleanups, community outreach and education activities, and efforts to engage federal, state, and local representatives in the strategic plan to address homelessness. The Historic Downtown Daytime Outreach Program is a weekday program in which a full-time trauma-trained professional outreaches to persons experiencing homelessness in the historical downtown area and offers transportation to a day center that provides safe and dignified place for those experiencing homelessness. Later in the presentation, we will discuss the other strategies to improve quality of life. At the November 12th City Council meeting, the City Council discussed strategies to reduce homelessness, and the City Council directed staff to include securing beds and a full-scope social worker-led homeless outreach team in the strategic plan. The Alliance for Regional Solutions, known as the Alliance, has agreed to secure up to 10 beds per night in their shelter network. The shelter network consists of shelters in North County. VISTA is a member of the Alliance and is home to a shelter within the network, Operation Hope. The beds being secured by the Alliance are low-barrier shelters that house single men and women. A low-barrier shelter is defined as a facility that will accept people who may have an addiction problem, so as long as they're not using drugs or alcohol in the facility. Additional information concerning the shelter beds will be discussed later in the presentation. Lastly, I want to summarize the activities of a full-time social worker with flex funds. In this program, VISTA would contract with a social provider to engage a full-time social worker with extensive experience with mental health and addiction issues. The social worker will be based in VISTA and will be part of a team that includes local law enforcement. The team, using trauma-informed approach, will focus on chronic homelessness and gathering data for evaluation. At this time, Mayor, staff recommends that the City Council hear public comments before we move on to specific cost, evaluation metrics, and individually seek your direction for inclusion in the final document.
Okay, I have 3 speakers, so we'll start with Roger Mayton, followed by Cheryl Keck.
Good evening, Council. I am Roger Mayton, and I've been a resident here for 42 years, so pretty close to however long it's been. 57 years, you mentioned, Mayor? The city's birthday?
Yes.
57 years, so that's pretty up there. So, and I love this city, and I love to add some input onto the homeless situation that we have here. It seems like it's been growing and getting even worse over the last decade or so. It was never like this before. I looked at the report that was that you guys came up with in the plan, and looking at all the different ways that homelessness happens to people. In the strategic plan, I don't see it being addressed directly on how we can prevent the mental health and how we can stop people from unemployment issues and so forth. It more looks like something that we can do to help figure out what we're going to do at this point, but not really to address what's going on. And it sounded, listening to the plan, the strategic plan to address homelessness, I think that should probably be a part of it, if possible. It's a big problem in our community, in our state, and in our country. Don't know if these are all the right answers to it. There's a lot of great people like yourselves who are thinking of different ways to do it. From the, it does look like this is a great start, in my ever so humble opinion, on how we can do something to help with the situation. And when you see them and you work with them and you talk with them, it's just sadness in my heart. So I am very glad to be here in this city and knowing that my council in the city really cares for these people as well. So thank you all for addressing this tough issue that a lot of people aren't addressing. I do have some concerns, though, for maybe for some of the businesses and the people's residences where they experience a lot of vagrancy with people sleeping on their properties. That's a condition that's, you've probably heard many stories as well. I was just speaking to a young lady in a gated community where it was next to the 78 freeway off Hacienda. And we cleared the area there and got a lot of debris out, but it displaced the homeless that were living there. So we didn't have a program for them, but they end up going into this gated community where there's a swimming pool and showers, and they just camped out there. And there was and as they kept trying to call the police to get assistance, it was nothing that can be done. They were just living in the community now. I don't know how long it lasts. I haven't reached back to them since. But, I think those things need to be addressed as well. Is what does a business owner do when somebody's there? What relief do they have? It harms their business. It harms their property.
Thanks, Roger.
Thank you.
Cheryl Keck, followed by Martin Lish.
Good evening. For the intro, my name is Cheryl Keck. I've been living in Vista for over 27 years. March 3rd will mark 5 years living in my vehicle. Loss of employment with injuries sealed that fate, losing the ability to pay rent. I am not a drug addict nor an alcoholic. I'm not mentally ill. Although my back seems to be holding out, I do still have some physical limitations. I am aging. But I am back into my field of expertise, but back in minimum wage, which is $13 an hour right now. Even at that, at 32 hours a week on a bi-weekly paycheck, I still cannot afford rent, even at $400 a month. Giving the standard deductions out of a gross pay, along with I will be losing food stamps, so I need to put aside at least $250 to $300 aside for food. I also will be losing part of Medi-Cal. I'm kind of hoping it becomes co-insurance, but I'm going to have to be paying my own health insurance now. And at my age, having the best insurance possible is the investment I'm going to make versus having somewhere to live. So I'm still living in my car. So after all my expenses, including medication that will not be covered by health insurance, I'm going to have less than $200 a month left. I am still living in my car. Please keep that in mind. What can the city do for people in my situation? How, I'm trying to get a hold of things. I'm doing okay. But I am still in my car. I have to pay outside to get showers, so I have a gym membership now. So that's another payment. It's cold outside, so I'm using gas in my car to keep warm. I still cannot afford rent, so who's going to take me in on $0 a month?
Thank you. Martin Lish.
Hello. My name is, as you already know, is Martin Lish, and I have been a resident of Vista since 1983, and I've been homeless for more than 20 out of those 30 years. Ms. Rapp had mentioned about a certain problem. I spoke to the Vista Unified School District in 1984 at the Mary Lou Clark Center to alleviate that problem. I've spoken to the mayor before one time about the sheriffs and homelessness and the city council. I've been doing this for a long time. Sometimes it's an addiction, sometimes it's my fault, sometimes it's not. There are many different ways that one can become homeless. There is corporate downsizing, there's divorce, there's mental illness, okay. Now, I would, if the city council really wants to do something we can't fix the problem. There isn't a single solution because there are a multitude of circumstances that lead to this. You know what I mean? So we can address what is here and maybe make some preventative measures. I've been doing this a long time, and I'm not an idiot. Well, okay, I'm the smartest idiot you'll probably ever meet. Having it up above it intelligence doesn't do any good if we don't use it. So I have all these this knowledge of how to fix the problem because I've been in the problem. And so I just want to ask you, if you want to fix the problem, then give me a call. The sheriff's department knows me. I've been arrested 100 times, and they will give me a letter of approval. There's no exaggeration. I have been arrested 100 times, and the sheriff's department will endorse me, and the homeless people will endorse me, so I can speak for them and speak to you. If I can get endorsement from you, then we can put these entities together, and maybe we actually can come up with a solution. Because I got some ideas. Some of them might be crazy, but I'm not an idiot. Thank you for listening, and give me a call. We'll do lunch.
Thank you for our speakers. It takes a lot of courage to come and speak to us. So going forward here, do you want to hear from our council, or do you want to?
Unless there's a general question, we'd recommend moving into the individual action items. Amanda will be giving an overview and then answering specific questions about each item as we go through.
Is that okay with everybody here? Because I have everybody, it's all lit up on the board here. Everybody wants to talk, so. We're going to discuss the individual items. Each individual one, is that okay? Okay, we'll go with that. Okay.
Okay, and first is the internal homelessness task force and community education outreach programs. We're actually not looking for direction from City Council on this particular item. Specific information concerning the internal task force and community education outreach programs can be located on pages 16, 21, and 28 of the staff report. For each item that we go through, I will identify what pages. You can also find the information, so if you want to go along with us. The task force will operate as basically as a steering committee and be charged with coordinating departments and divisions and evaluating and implementing the strategic plan. The task force will also be responsible for creating community outreach resources that align with the strategic plan. Before we move on to the next item, did anyone have any questions regarding these?
Councilmember Contreras.
First, I just want to thank staff so much for coming together, taking the initiative to create this internal task force, seeing as how homelessness touches so many different departments here at the City of Vista. I'm sure all of us share the same sentiment that we're really, really thankful that staff has taken this step. I do have some questions, though, regarding the internal homelessness task force, especially because it looks like the task force will be charged with overseeing the progress of the strategic plan, which includes creating a metric to track the progress. Because of that, I'm curious to hear how the council will remain informed of what the task force is doing, reviewing the concerns that come out. To date, I haven't seen any documents coming out of this task force. So I would like to see, I don't know if minutes could be provided for every meeting or a summary of, outcomes, questions, just because this task force seems like it is going to be an integral part of this strategic plan. So I would like to hear from you all about that.
Sure. So the task force has been meeting semi-regularly since actually after the June City Council workshop on homelessness. One of the things that our consultants brought to our attention right away after they had been interviewing a number of city employees is that there's a lot of things happening, but we don't think everyone knows what each other is doing and are on the same page. So we convened a task force that is comprised of all of our departments and then in some cases individual divisions as well to make sure that we had a diverse cross-section of the city that is on a regular basis interacting with people experiencing homelessness in our business communities, residences, parks, all of those areas. So at this point, what we've been doing is basically we've been on a learning tour, doing a lot of education about some of the issues related to homelessness, some of the issues in California related to what's legal and illegal, what's constitutional. And then what we've been doing is setting a meeting that coincides with after the most recent council meeting where this item was discussed to provide an overview and answer any questions that they might have. So at this point, we haven't actually been keeping minutes because we've really just been in an information sharing and gathering mode. What we expect that will happen is after we have a final plan that's been adopted and endorsed by the City Council, is that this committee will be probably splitting up the action items based on which one is germane to the divisions and departments that are there, and working with our housing program manager and with, where applicable, any contracted service providers or other agencies to basically confirm that the metrics that we're recommending are valid, that will help us establish a baseline, and then basically just providing updates and reports. In terms of what the City Council would see, any of the information that we're putting out is a public record, and we can provide that to you at any time. But what we expect is, especially in the first year or so, there's going to be things where we go, you know what, this isn't going the way we thought it would, or this is going better than we thought it would, and we're going to be coming back to you guys on a regular basis with updates on not only the plan but the items within it to make sure that we're on the right course based on the council's priorities. If there's something specific that you would like us to include in the plan in terms of output, we can do that, though.
Yeah, I don't know about my colleagues, but I feel that it's a task force being so important to this strategic plan and the outcome that the council should be well informed, because I'm sure that there's some kind of outcome from every meeting, whether it's certain questions that we're seeing across departments that aren't being answered, or whatever the case might be. I'm sure that after every single meeting, there's some kind of outcome that the council would like to have and be able to use that to further our knowledge of this issue and subject, and that way we can make a more informed decision making in the future. But I would like to hear from my other colleagues, see if they have certain recommendations and or concerns.
And Mayor, I might recommend, if the council wants to go in this direction, that'd be fine, but I might recommend quarterly updates, just because things are so fluid. In some aspects, we might be really ingrained in them, and others we might not have worked on them as much. So I'd recommend quarterly written updates to the City Council.
I'd be in favor of that, yes.
Okay, and I'm going to clear this board here because we're going to take each individually, and then I'll know who wants to talk about what, okay? So don't be offended that I just erased all your names from talking. Okay, so are we okay with this? Does anybody have anything else on this particular item? Or can we move on to the next one?
Well, can I ask?
Oh, wait, Deputy Mayor.
Sorry. One of the big bullet points I have in my notebook with a bright red Post-it note doesn't fit into your specific categories. So I want to ask it at the beginning because it's in the beginning of your report here in the strategic plan, and I don't want to get lost down the road. But we talk about on page 9 of 138, it talks about, in addition to the leadership of the council, staff, et cetera, we have put together principles that we're going to follow and are cemented in the strategic plan, and it talks about the shared framework among stakeholders, fiscally responsible approaches, measurable outcomes, et cetera. And then when we get down to the second to the last one, I just have a comment that I really want to interject here, and it goes in part to what one of our speakers was saying. We recognize that addressing homelessness requires a regional approach and resources, and we will work with regional partners to leverage resources for VISTA, which I think is absolutely fabulous, and we need to do this on a regional basis. And as we know, the homeless population can be transient, the funding for it can be regional. We also need to really, really, really poke the bear, if I can say, to Sacramento. It not only is regional to us, but a lot of this has to be through our legislative advocacy in Sacramento. So I would like to see some verbiage to that effect in this as well, because I think it's very important and we can't lose sight of that.
And we could add anything to the principles that the council desires. We do have an entire action item on legislative advocacy.
Okay, then.
That we can, that if it's not what the city council wants to see, we can rework or add different strategies.
Well, I just didn't want to get farther into the document without being able to hit page 8 first. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll save the rest for later.
Okay, are we good to move? Okay. Next.
Thank you. Now, the next program that we're going to speak up is a homelessness prevention pilot program. Specific information concerning the pilot program is located on pages 17 and 29 of the staff report. The prevention pilot program will be administered by the State of California Department of Housing and Community Development, known as HCD. HCD utilizes federal regulations to define prevention, specifically the United States Housing of Urban and Development HUD. Homelessness prevention funds may be provided to individuals, families who meet criteria under the at-risk of homelessness definition to provide housing relocation and stabilization services and short and or medium-term rental assistance necessary to prevent an individual or family from moving into an emergency shelter. Now, that's the definition that was provided of exactly what prevention services are, so I know that there was a few questions exactly what prevention means, so we did want to go ahead and pull that definition out for you. As discussed on September 24th, the language in the legislation that is allocating the funding requires some relationship with the Community Resource Center in Encinitas and requires us to use the funding for prevention and intervention services. Staff's intention is to work through the CRC with other local partners. The evaluation metrics for this activity will include the number of people assisted, number of people prevented from eviction, number of people rapidly rehoused, consistency of stable housing after assistance at 6 and 13 months. The reason for 13 months is typically a lease will last for a year. We want to make sure that the person was stably housed even past their initial lease term. And then also the number of people completing financial literacy programs and or job training programs. So financial literacy will be an important component to any of our prevention programs. Before we move on to the next action item, we are looking for direction from the City Council Based on previous direction received at September 24th City Council meeting, staff recommends that the homelessness prevention program be included in the strategic plan to address homelessness. And we're ready for any questions regarding this program.
Councilmember Franklin.
What is the criteria of, quote, at risk of homelessness? Is that printed here?
I do have it here as well. I can go ahead and give you, it's a rather really long definition, but I can go ahead and state it for you.
Please.
An individual or family who has an annual income below 30% of the median family income and does not have sufficient resources or support networks immediately available to prevent them from moving to an emergency shelter or another place. And, so it's and meets one of the following conditions: has moved because of economic reasons 2 or more times during the 60 days immediately preceding the application for assistance, or is living in the home of another because of economic hardship, or has been notified that their right to occupy their current housing or living situation will be terminated within 21 days after the date of application for assistance, or lives in a hotel or motel and the cost is not paid by charitable organizations or by federal, state, or local programs for low-income individuals, or lives in an SRO, single resident occupancy or efficiency apartment unit in which there reside more than 2 persons, or lives in a larger housing unit in which there resides more than 1.5 persons per room, or is exiting or a publicly funded institution or system of care, or lastly, otherwise lives in a housing that has characteristics associated with instability and an increased risk of homelessness as identified in the recipient's approved con plan, which is CDBG funding. So these are federal regulations which the state HCD department goes by.
Give me that last criteria again. The very last one.
Otherwise lives in housing that has characteristics associated with instability and an increased risk of homelessness as identified in the recipient's approved con plan.
As I understand it, we're going to take this $250,000 and we're going to make grants, one-time grants to individuals that meet this criteria. I do not agree with this approach. I don't agree with it on a number of grounds. My most strenuous objection to this proposal is I do not, in my heart, believe it will be effective. I don't believe that it will truly make a lasting change for individuals suffering from homelessness. I propose instead that we take these funds, and this is a narrow criteria that you've outlined, but I think it would fit what I would want to do with the money, which is I'd like to seek up to 250 individuals who grew up in homelessness, experienced it as a child, and likely meet one of these criteria. And I'd like to offer an educational grant to be used either for high school or for college to meet any number of expenses for young people who have, like I say, experienced homelessness, who we know statistically are more likely to experience homelessness as adults. The alternative being proposed by staff is one that supposes to know the condition of someone's circumstances in 30 days from now or 21 days. This is not something that anyone without a crystal ball can know. You can surmise, but you can't know for sure. I'd like to use this money to make lasting change. I'd like to give the power of information, knowledge, and education to these young people. I'd like the grant of educational assistance, call it a scholarship, whatever you like. I'd like it to be conditioned upon completion of financial literacy education, quite frankly, to give skills to young people that I myself didn't acquire until I was an adult, skills about management of personal credit, management of personal funds, savings, the importance of having an emergency fund, how to use a checking account. basic skills that sadly our high schools, our middle schools are not giving to our young people. I think that by taking 250 young people in our community who have suffered homelessness, by giving them tools that they likely don't already have, and equipping them to meet the challenges that they face in the future, and trying to intervene in their lives at a point well beyond which they are in an immediate crisis, I think we have a much better opportunity to make a lasting difference. I also like this approach because these are one-time funds with no expectation of continued funding, though I've noted that staff has proposed we might be able to fund the program in the future from the Affordable Housing Fund. The reality is we have already accepted $250,000 in funds for this purpose. I think my suggestion fits within your definition. I think there are probably 250 young people in Vista who absolutely meet the criteria that you've just outlined. I've made detailed notes. I think it would be a better way. I think it would be an amazing thing as a young person who has had a hard time in life, who has grown up facing these challenges, to have somebody in the community take note of them, invest in them, give them the tools, recognize them, and show them that the community believes in their potential and to change the trajectory of their life. I think that's a way we could use this money to change people's lives, not to Band-Aid a problem once an immediate crisis is already taking place. I genuinely do not believe that the Band-Aid approach is the right approach. I think if we're going to give money away, and that's what this is a state program to give money out to individuals. I think we should always look to give people a hand up, to give them the knowledge that has power to change their lives, and not to give them something that'll have a short-term impact, but something that they can share with their friends, something they can share with their spouses, with their children. I really honestly believe there's a better way to spend this money. I really do not like the proposal that's before us. I would really hope that we could come to a different agreement about how to spend this money, because I truly believe we could do something very special in the lives of a lot of young people in our community. That's the comment that I have for right now.
Councilmember Contreras.
Yeah, $250,000 really is not that much money. Not when we're looking at the severity of this issue. I really appreciate Councilmember Franklin, the concern about our children here in Vista. And 100%, I am certain that there are 250 individuals that are young and have experienced homelessness. I believe that wouldn't be difficult to find, seeing as how we have 1,300 students identified in Vista Unified School District that are either experiencing homelessness, where they're living in a hotel, motel, they're living in a car, they don't have shelter, or they're tripled or doubled up in a household. So let's just think about that situation for a second. Say, you're 12 years old and you're going through these circumstances. How effective would an academic type of grant be when you don't know if you're going to get food that night? If you don't know where you're going to sleep. So, I do appreciate the concern, and I think that, as a city, this is something that we should consider, right? Making sure that we offer our resources that, we get through taxpayer money, that we are offering our youth development opportunities so that they could be, they don't have to wait to be great here in Vista. However, I think it is a little premature to look at using $250,000 on a scholarship basis when these kids don't necessarily have the stability in their lives at this moment to even start constructing a future self. One where they can see themselves going to college and graduating and doing all the things that you want to do as an adult. So I just want us to be conscious of what people are experiencing day to day when they're in the situation of housing insecurity. And, I don't think that it's a short-term fix. And I'll offer an example to you, to my colleagues and to the public. Recently, actually this past Sunday, I was walking around Vista, as I casually do every once in a while, and I ran into an individual who actually helped build this facility we're in. And when the recession hit, they were in construction, husband and wife, have a little girl. They lost everything. They lost their household. And they've just generally been having a difficult time. They recently got a notice. So they're actually, they try to stay on the same street that they had lived before. They had lost their home. They found a home to rent. And they're about to be evicted because they don't have the funds necessary to stay there. So with the program where we only have one-time funds, maybe we can't help a ton of people. But the depth of helping one family, such as the family that I ran into this Sunday, speaks volumes of our values. So I just want us to keep that into consideration, because when you're short $600, $700, even $215, there's no amount of financial literacy that can help you stay in your house. So I just want us to be cognizant that these are situations that are happening to residents here in Vista that have been here their whole lives, that through a series of circumstances have fallen down, and they're not looking for a handout, but they're looking for return on investment on their taxes that they pay at minimum, right? So I think we have an amazing opportunity here with this $250,000 to really impact at a high level these families in our own backyards that don't know where to go. This individual, she was talking to her, and she has so much hope in us. So I hope we do the right thing.
Councilmember Green.
All right. Thank you so much, Amanda, for the report and for all the information. Sorry, I got a little frog in my throat over there. I like, the idea of educational incentives to young people anytime we can as a city. If there's any way to work that out, great. But I also feel like giving a young person an educational incentive doesn't guarantee that that's going to prevent homelessness for a family either. As much as you may disagree with the non-barrier aspect of handing out these funds, I really feel like this is an opportunity for Vista to do something different. We've never done anything like this before. We've never provided funds like this without barriers for families that were at risk. And if you heard the qualifications of the at-risk families, the 30% of the median income, all the ands that went with it, and then the ors were still pretty heavy. There's a lot that you have to do to fit in this box here. To give you an idea, my dad left when I was 2 months old. I was raised by a single mom right here in Vista. She made $1,000 a month. And I was raised on food stamps, powdered milk, government cheese. And my mom used to say, we don't pay the electric bill until we get the red notice on our door. And that's how I was raised. And luckily, our electric wasn't shut off. We would always rush down to SDG&E and pay that bill. And, Mom would always make it by the skin of her teeth. But There were 4 of us living in a 700 square foot, half of a duplex here off of East Los Angeles Street, and we could barely afford to make that and feed the family. And my mom worked for a church, and for years, we struggled a whole lot. And making $1,000 per month, if there was a program that could give somebody like that, a mom like that with kids, $2,000 and say, hey, in order to prevent you from being homeless and losing this place, we could help, supplement your electric bill for the next 6 months. What would that do for you? What would that do for your family? And then could we put you on programs to say, how can you budget better, and, financial literacy programs for a family? And I think that's what these funds were kind of meant for, and kind of what we can be using them for, is to help people who are at risk of being homeless, whether it's they can't afford rent, they can't afford a bill, they can't afford to feed their family. If you've ever had to choose between paying rent or paying mortgage and feeding your kids, which I'm a father of 4 and I feed my kids every time. And having something like this would be extremely beneficial. Even in the recession, my wife and I had to move in with my mother-in-law with my 4 kids. So I've been in a situation, I've been in situations where I've had plenty and been in situations where I've had little. I've always found contentment because I've had love, but love sometimes and all the time doesn't pay the bills. And what you really need sometimes is just a little handout that can also be a hand up. And I feel like this is one and the same. This isn't just throwing money at a problem. This is saying, hey, Vista, we care about you. And you've never had a program like this in the city before, where you could come to the city and we could be a help as opposed to a hindrance. And we have a lot of organizations that do a lot of scholarships. I know a member of several local nonprofits. I know our PTAs do a lot. I know our county does a lot. Our schools do a lot. And I would definitely be willing to open the conversation to educational incentives for any homeless youth within Vista Unified School District. I'm sure with our, overages annually, that we may be able to find some money for some type of program like that. And if we're really concerned with our homeless youth being able to be properly educated, by all means, that's another discussion item in my opinion. But the program that staff's come up with, and even the recommendation to use CRC, was something I was very skeptical of, because I've never worked with CRC. I don't know that our staff has worked with CRC, but knowing that the state doesn't have all of these guidelines, the money comes to us as a city, and then we report on how we spend it. We're not having to knock down CRC's door to get this money. So we really do have a lot of control over these funds, and I feel like the program that staff put together and the intentions behind it, when you look at the rental assistance, first and last month's rent deposit, utility assistance, transportation assistance, hotel motel vouchers. These are awesome things, in my opinion, for the community. So I support staff's recommendation on this one. I also tugs on the heartstrings from an educational standpoint. So city manager and council sitting next to me listening, maybe that's something in the future we could definitely work on. But these funds, I think we use them. We're able to show the state what we did with them so that they renew them again. And we use all this money. And if it gets to where we've only used $200,000 for utility bills and things, the other $50,000, let's look at, is educational incentives a way to spend it if we're not spending it? But I really feel like we have enough families that need this help that we can give it to them. So thank you so much.
Maybe Ms. Zimmerman can comment on the financial literacy portion of these funds.
So a component of the staff recommendation would be that individuals or families that would be recipients of the funding would agree via a contract that in exchange for receiving the funds, that they would take part in a financial literacy component through the provider that's going to be issuing the funds on the city's behalf.
Deputy Mayor Rigby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you for the information on this. I think I'm glad that we're going to be getting the $250,000 and possibly have monies in the future to work with on this. One of the things that I just want to put out there for this funding is one of the demographics that we rarely talk about in our homeless community are the aged out foster youth. Now, if we want to talk about prevention of homelessness, that would be one group that I would like to look at. So I would be very interested to see what we can do to look at that demographic and see what it is that needs to be done for the homeless foster youth in our community and what we can do for them. And I think this is the funding that might be able to do that. Some of the things you're talking about here are first month, last month rent, et cetera. So I don't know what it would take to set somebody up in an apartment, or, maybe get 2 or 3 of the foster youth sharing an apartment. But I would really like us to see, as a city, to take a harder look at our foster youth and see what we can do to better help them. So that would be my only comment on this. I do like the financial awareness, financial literacy component. There are a lot of reasons, as was stated, a lot of reasons that people are homeless, that find themselves in that situation. And some of them are circumstances far beyond their control. And then some of them are, as one of our speakers had alluded to earlier, I think he's left, are personal choices. And I think it's that particular percentage that would help. But again, anything that we can do to help anybody on any level, I think, is very important. So I wouldn't want to lose sight of that. So I appreciate that component.
Interesting, because I had written down here the foster youth, that was one of the things I would like to look at also. And but for the grace of God go I mean, truly, I was brought up with a single mother also, and we struggled all the time. She was a teacher, but my dad died when I was very young, and we struggled for many years. So I understand it, and sometimes it's just you can have a budget and be financially responsible, but something happens that just kills your budget and you're just out of money. And so if somebody could take that and just help somebody over that hump, whether it's a car that breaks down or whether it's a medical emergency, I think that if we can help them that little bit, it can help people. So I would be supportive of this. So I would say Councilmember Franklin.
Well, I want to clarify that my proposal wouldn't be aimed at people that are age 12. It would be aimed at individuals who are near the age of emancipation, either by a court or by achieving majority age. I was specifically, and didn't mention it, but I was specifically thinking about foster youth. I had somebody who was a part of my life who was homeless for a number of years after being part of the foster youth system. And it is absolutely a key demographic that is at high risk for homelessness. And it is a demographic where, again, by investing and paying interest in that demographic, young people, when you pay interest in them, is so incredible to see them light up and know that somebody believes in them. And I understand also that the funds have to be used for housing, so they certainly could be applied under any kind of a program where we're going to focus on foster youth. I think the difference between focusing on the youth demographic and those who have suffered homelessness and who meet these criteria that are outlined is that you've got an opportunity to really change somebody's life prospectively, potentially to intervene in their life before they're in an outright crisis, while they would meet the lawful definition that's been prescribed. But before they're in an outright crisis, you'd have the opportunity to really reach them at a time in their life when they're hungriest to acquire knowledge. I would be delighted if we as a council said that we wanted to take some percentage of these funds and focus on that demographic, say 1/2. I'd like to achieve some recognition that there is a better way. I have not suffered great hardship in my life, but I have bought a half tank of gas because I couldn't afford a full one, and I've rolled pennies with my mother so that we could go to the grocery store. And by no means do I claim to have any circumstance that's any less than anyone else's, but I've I have been in those situations in my life and can understand. But and as good as it would feel, and I know it would, to solve the problem of somebody who is facing a present crisis, when I ran for council, the city had a structural deficit. And some said, well, no, it's okay because it's just a structural deficit. I didn't really know what that meant. And so I looked it up. It's a financial term that means a fundamental imbalance in planned expenditures and planned receipts. It means you plan to spend more than you plan to receive. That's what a structural deficit is. It's on purpose. When you have a structural deficit in your living situation, an injection of funds will only solve that structural deficit for a time, and then the structural deficit will catch up with you again. We've got to help people plan so that they don't have structural deficits. I think it would be great if we could recognize the need of foster youth and other at-risk youth who meet this demographic and focus just half, because I don't think there's maybe agreement for more than that, but I'd like to make a motion that we restrict half of this money to the foster and at-risk youth that meet the legal definitions here, because I think that's a demographic that we can have the best long-term success with in really changing their circumstances in life and giving them that hand up instead of a handout.
Councilmember Contreras.
I just want to offer a little information regarding transitional age youth, which is 18 to about 24, 25. I did have a town hall December 2019 that was a discussion panel focused on youth and young adult homelessness. It was really eye-opening. So I love that my colleagues are very interested in what can the city do to address this demographic. I know North County Lifeline has an amazing partnership with Just in Time foster youth. They just opened a drop-in center, not too far from here, and they're seeing an incredible amount of youth just dropping in. But I do want to offer a point of information because there is a striking portion of transitional age youth that fit within one specific demographic. It is estimated that about 40% of transitional age youth are part of the LGBTQI plus community. 40%, that's a lot. So if we could just love our children more, we could reduce homelessness a lot. So I just wanted to offer that point of information. And I do support that. I do not support using half of these funds, but I do support the idea that the city needs to invest in our youth. And so that's a discussion I'm very much willing to have at any point in time with my colleagues.
I agree with that. So I'm seeing no more discussion. I guess and I don't have a motion. I would make the motion to go with the staff recommendation. Second that. Okay, cast your votes. That motion passes with one abstention. Okay, moving on to the next one, which is the Home Share Coordination Services.
Okay, so now the Home Share Coordination Services, specific information concerning the Home Share Coordination Services program can be located on pages 18 and 30 of the staff report. The cost for a full-time coordinator, as you can see, is $50,000. The city has been in discussions with neighboring cities to split the cost to contract with a coordinator who would span the entire 78 corridor. The price for the services range on the hiring of a part-time coordinator, which would be $25,000, or a full-time coordinator, which would be $50,000. The cost would be lower if other cities did agree to go ahead and do a coordinated effort. It's recommended to go $5,000 for if all 5 cities were included for a part-time, or $10,000 for a full-time coordinator, and that's if all 5 cities included. There has been interest from 2 other cities at this particular time to join, and we have been contacted by a provider which is named Elder Help. Elder Help does specifically do senior elder care home share programs, but that's their focus, but they work on all age groups and definitions, so they can handle all care. Before we move on to the next action item, we are looking for direction from the City Council, and based on direction received at the September 24th City Council meeting, staff does recommend including the Home Share Coordinator Services Program into the Homeless Strategic Plan. And I'm available to answer any questions.
Councilmember Contreras.
I love the premise of this program, and I think, forgive me if I have this wrong, but other cities that are doing a program similar to this, they're seeing success in year 2 because of the buildup in getting qualified applicants so we can build up that housing stock to then match individuals with those owners. Am I correct that it's about a 2-year process? So year 2 is where we anticipate seeing a lot of successful outcomes. Is that correct?
Correct. What we have heard from Elder Help is that it does take a while to find first the people who have a home that they would like to stay in but are having trouble either financially or because they're aging or have a disability and would like to be matched with a person who could potentially use a lower rent in exchange for, in some cases, just to have a companionship in the home. Some people like roommates and other people around, or to help with light housework or going to the grocery store and transportation. So what the program will be doing initially would be aggressively marketing to those people who may have the space, and at the same time starting to put out information for people who are looking for a place. It's kind of hard to ask someone, hey, are you looking for a place when you don't have one to offer them? So it does take a while to build up that stock and to start to see a true work in the match. The other thing that's important is that it's not a first come first served basis type of program. Each homeowner and a potential roommate are matched based on their ability to their preferences and their similarities. Basically, if you have somebody who doesn't like pets, then it's probably not good to match them in a home that has pets, things like that. So it is on a case-by-case basis. It also includes potential background checks for both sides of the party to make sure that it's a safe environment, regular check-ins, mediation services if needed, and if a match isn't working, work to transition a person out and potentially find a new roommate.
It's really exciting, and I move to accept staff's recommendation to implement the Home Share Coordination Services Program as part of our strategies to address homelessness.
Thank you. Councilmember Franklin.
Well, I'll second that motion. This is the kind of program that I can fully support because this is a program that leverages existing underutilized assets and helps individuals access them in a way that they're comfortable with, provides surety to them, helps them navigate the process of finding a roommate. I think this is ideal, particularly for seniors who aren't necessarily incapable of living alone but no longer desire to live alone. I think there's a lot of benefits potentially to this program, and I am excited to support it. So I hope we can think more in the mode of how we help people utilize underutilized assets and make connections that really help them find solutions, because this is a good use of our dollars.
Okay, seeing no more speakers, we have a motion and a second. We'll vote on that, please. That motion passes unanimously. Moving on to our Historic Downtown Daytime Outreach Program.
Thank you. So specific information concerning this program can be located on page 19 and 31 of the staff report. And let me move ahead, sorry. Now, Mental Health Systems, or known as MHS, is the provider that has agreed to launch a pilot program that will be able to transport people experiencing homelessness from downtown Vista to an MHS clubhouse or day center. MHS runs 2 North County day centers that offer services to chronically homeless individuals with a mental health or substance abuse diagnosis. Their day centers are open from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. A professional will engage chronically homeless individuals in the historic downtown area, providing transportation from and to a day center where they would receive food, case management, and other supports, including housing support as appropriate. All members are required to participate in some sort of therapeutic intervention. While the day center is a housing first program, no drugs or alcohol are allowed on site. At the end of the day, the individuals will be transported back to Vista unless they are connected to housing. The ultimate goal is to connect the individuals with housing, either through intervention, case management, or family reunification. Whatever supports are available is what they'll try to do. The evaluation metrics for this program will include the number of homeless people utilizing services and the types of services, calls for service related to homelessness in the historic downtown area, number of persons obtaining employment, number of persons receiving vocational training, types and frequencies of services accessed, and housing outcomes. The cost for this program is estimated to be about $90,000 annually. And at this time, we're looking for direction from City Council. Based on previous direction received at the October 22nd City Council meeting, staff does recommend that the outreach program be included in the strategic plan.
Councilmember Franklin.
When we last discussed this particular proposal, I asked if we had visited with any of the individuals who are suffering from homelessness, who are regularly present in the historic downtown. I understand since I last spoke with staff that we have not had the opportunity to do that yet. I would like to ask the council to delay the implementation of this item until such time as the social worker that we're going to discuss as, I believe, the last item in this plan has been in place for at least several months and has had the opportunity to have a conversation, build some rapport with some of the individuals who would be potential customers of this program. I'm not comfortable spending $90,000 on a program that, as best we can determine, has never been tried elsewhere. This is a true pilot program. It's a new idea, a new concept. It's unproven. The reality is that most individuals are going to be reluctant to board a minivan because they will not likely be able to take their possessions with them or secure them. I don't know that we've solved that question. That's an important question. Folks who don't have a way to secure their belongings are reluctant to leave them. Some of these folks have pets. Would the pets be allowed? Many of them are active drug users. You indicated that drug use or possession of drugs at the location is not allowed. I'm sure that's not actively enforced, probably only if they see something or somebody's actively using. The issue is, and the only reason I'm reluctant to support this at this time, is I do not believe that before we spend almost $100,000 of taxpayer money, I do not believe that we have yet done our due diligence to interview the potential customers and really have an in-depth conversation and ask them if this is a service that, given the conditions we're going to place upon it, that they might actually avail themselves of. We're going to hire a social worker. I think there's probably agreement to do that. I think that social worker can go out into the community, and these are the exact individuals that we expect that social worker to contact and to build rapport with. And that social worker can make the inquiry of these individuals and can bring some information back to us. I'd be more than willing to consider this particular proposal at a later time, but to spend $90,000 without even having, expended the shoe leather to ask somebody whether they might actually board under the conditions we're going to place, I don't think is responsible. So that's where I'm at on this. I would ask that we table this and consider it when we get a 3-month or a 6-month report on the activities of the social worker.
Councilmember Green.
I'm all for being at the tip of the spear on things, but I think Councilmember Franklin is right on this one as far as if we're going to be spending our own affordable housing funds and our CDBG money as opposed to it all coming from a grant, that we should basically make sure that it works. And I like the idea. And basically what I'm thinking is we leave this in our strategic plan to address homelessness, but what appease me is, as opposed to rushing it and saying begin program within the next 6 months, that maybe we say begin program within the next 12 months at recommendation of social worker. And that way we kind of say, hey, if she doesn't recommend that we start this program, and she could recommend it in 60 or 90 days if she gives us the appropriate information, maybe we do start it in 6 months. But I think to not have information of who's going to use the service and just say, let's throw money at it right away and get it going in 6 months really rushes the situation. So if that was a motion that you made to, I don't know, maybe if we would amend the motion to where I don't necessarily want to remove this from the strategic plan, but I do want to change the verbiage to say within the next 12 months at recommendation of social worker. And then this program would be totally acceptable to me.
I'll first your motion.
And I will second that motion.
Deputy Mayor.
I was just going to say that I agree with the comments of my colleagues. So I guess we're ready to vote on that one.
Councilmember Contreras, are you pushing your button? No. It's not there yet. You're voting? You're voting, but it's not there
Do you need
yet?
the motion restated, or is everybody clear on the motion?
I think we're clear.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so please cast your votes. That motion passes with one no vote. But it is going to remain in the program, from what I understand, correct? And okay, and then at the discretion of the social worker. Okay, moving on to the next thing was the encampment cleanup, and that will be our next.
Okay. Yes, encampment cleanup is the specific information pertaining to encampment cleanup can be located on pages 20 and 32 of the staff report. Since September, additional cleanups have been taking place, and encampment cleanups will continue to happen on a regular monthly basis. The budget for encampment cleanup for fiscal year 2021 is $70,000. Encampment cleanups will be included in the strategic plan. I'm sorry, we actually there's a recommendation here, sorry. The recommendation, the amount of $70,000 is already included in the operating budget. We just wanted you to be aware that there is additional funding that is being put towards encampment cleanup for it to happen on a more continuous basis versus what we had been doing previously. Larger encampments did take place at Hacienda, and now we'll continue with those on a monthly basis. Any questions before we move on to the next item?
I have a few questions.
Yes.
I have a question. The people that we moved out of there, when Roger came and told us that they moved into the neighborhood, the gated community across the street, is there nothing that they can do about that, or that our sheriffs, at least the sheriffs, can't do anything there? It's a private community.
So I'm not familiar with the exact particulars there, but private property is not under the same kind of issues that you see with public property under the Martin versus Boise case. If a private property owner has somebody trespassing and they call the police will help them. The sheriff's department will go out there and enforce no trespassing laws for for residences and businesses of the city. So we want to encourage people to reach out to law enforcement if they have any concerns. Maybe it was something that was happening in a part of the property. If it was an apartment complex that the management didn't know about and wasn't aware of, but private properties are enforceable under no trespassing laws.
So I thought, so if it's a gated community, if they have a community center and they get in the community center, would that be a HOA thing then that would have to remove them? Would that be?
It would be under the HOA rules that they wouldn't be allowed there, but again, the sheriff's department would enforce it.
Okay.
Mayor, if I could jump in and clarify one bit on the encampment cleanup. As you all know, we spent considerable time over the last 3 months. Public Works has done a great job of cleaning out the encampments along Hacienda. We are not waiting a month to go back in and do enforceable cleanup. In fact, there's 2 more encampments that have cropped up in the last week. Code enforcement has already tagged those for 72 hours, and at the end of the week, we're going to go in and clean those up. So I want to let you know we're not waiting a month, but the goal is that at some point, we'll have gone in enough that the enforcement process will be on a monthly basis. But we're certainly not waiting when there's something that occurs.
Okay. So, Councilmember Green.
Thank you so much, Madam Mayor. So this is definitely something that I support. One of my questions just kind of had to do with safety, is if we're now having Public Works do more, because we're saying we're going to add additional cleanups to them. Are we going to be pairing them with our sheriff's deputies in these situations where They
already are.
So every time they go into these...
And Frank, we've contracted out for a majority of the cleanup work. But it's
Okay.
in conjunction with Public Works assisting them and the Sheriff's Department going into preserving the peace and code enforcement, posting and noticing the area.
Okay, so the sheriff's goes out with them every time. They're never out unprotected. Okay. And these just come up as additional work orders for Public Works?
Yeah, when they're observed.
Okay. Awesome. No, I think that's great, and I'm glad that there's sheriff's deputies out there with them. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Rigby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On the cleanup encampment, I'm looking at the estimated annual cost and then the potential funding sources grid that you've given to us in our agenda. And everything in here, internal homelessness task force, not applicable for funding, homeless prevention pilot program, SB2, affordable housing funding, same with the home share coordination services, and when we get to the daytime outreach program, the same thing, and on down the line, except for encampment cleanup. That comes out of our general fund. Now, some of the encampments, a great deal of them, are along our creek beds, and as we know from discussions previously, a lot of things end up in the creek water, in the creek watershed, and there have been some issues to the point that the federal government is getting involved in some of these watershed issues and contamination issues. So I would really like to see what funding statewide or federally we can go after for these encampment cleanups to reimburse our general fund. So that would be my only comment on this one, is I wouldn't want us to see that it has to come out of our general fund and not try to recoup that money.
We're fairly aggressive to find non-general fund funds for almost all of the city's programs, so we will definitely keep our eyes out for those.
Excellent. I like that you are aggressive on this. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Franklin.
We do have some new funds for pollution pickup that are coming through some pollution remediation mandates for stormwater systems. I said this before in a quite animated way, and I believe it to be true. If you would go and clean up the encampments more frequently, it would cost less. And that is because if you were there, and what I would do, because Aztec is already in our community on a daily basis, I see their trucks every day, if you would hire them to go on a daily basis for some period of time, and then I would maybe cut down to 48 hours, I think you'd find, because we largely do pay based on the hour or the poundage that's removed. Is that correct?
EDCO is actually offered their services to the city for free on the encampment cleanouts.
Well, that's tremendous. The point that I want to make, though, is we as a council should agree that once a month is not nearly sufficient. It literally should be daily. We should figure out how to get that done. The residents of our community, particularly those who live in near proximity, do not feel safe. They expect this council to make Vista a safe community in which to reside, rent, own, and live. They expect it to be clean. Those are basic expectations that the people that live here have of us: cleanliness and safety. We owe that as a duty to the people we represent, an absolute duty. If we cannot deliver on those two items, then we have fundamentally failed the people that we represent. If we were to go in there on a daily basis and there was a guarantee of timely, prompt, almost immediate removal, complying with the edicts of the law, then what you would find is individuals would learn that these were not areas that they could camp for 30 days without detection and without removal, and the problem would move somewhere. We would have to deal with that, but deal with it we should and we must, because that's the expectation that the people have for us that live in the communities. I know that Councilwoman Rigby represents several thousand people that live immediately adjacent to the property behind Costco. I represent hundreds of homeowners that are in immediate adjacent to creeks that are filled with encampments, and they're looking at us and they are feeling that we have failed them. I think that we should, and I truly believe, on a mathematical basis, if we were to commit ourselves to daily policing of these areas, I truly believe in the long run our annual costs would go down, not up. I truly believe that. There's a business case to be made for being more proactive, because ultimately you discourage the behavior, and then you're not taking out tens of thousands of pounds every year. You're taking out thousands of pounds and then hundreds of pounds, because people learn that that behavior is not going to be accepted for 30 days. I think this is, I really wish my colleagues would weigh in on this and agree with me. I truly feel that this is absolutely essential. People expect us to clean up the city of Vista. They want to live in a safe and clean community.
If I can interject, that's exactly what we are doing. It took a while to get the extensive cleanup that needed to happen in Hacienda under control and continue, especially over the inclement weather we've been having in December and January. But now we have a cleared out area at Hacienda. Well, I'll just call it Hacienda for lack of a better service. And our Public Works Department has established easement roads. So now we have not only city vehicles that can easily pass through and put eyes on the property, but also law enforcement can do that on a regular daily basis in most cases. So when they do see something small, we can immediately get out there, properly notice it for the removal, and do it. So what you're mentioning there, Councilmember Franklin, is what we are doing.
Okay.
So I want to make sure you understand that and the community understands that.
No, what I had said was, Ms. Lee had mentioned monthly, and that's our goal to get to that point. But what I'd said was we cleaned out the creek, and we were out there as of last week, posting this week, and removing encampments by the end of the week. And we're going to continue to do that until people realize that it's not an area that they're just going to be able to have a free-for-all and hoard in.
I'm not sure where I was confused, but I guess what I'm asking for is a sustained effort
we're definitely attempting to do that with the council's authorization of $70,000 for this current fiscal year that we're spending. This is kind of, as Ms. Zimmerman said, it's our trial run with this in September, and our goal is to continue to eradicate and not make it a real friendly place to set up an encampment.
All right.
Well, why does it have to be 72 hours? Why can't it be like 24 hours?
That's the law we have to post for.
That's a law? Okay. So, and then I would say if you run low on money, I would say use the money. If you run low, come back, because I'm sure that we will be okay to keep that going.
We won't hesitate to do that. Thank you.
Okay. Just want to be sure we keep going on it. Don't say we're out of money. Okay. So do we need to vote on? Oh, sorry, Deputy Mayor, did you have?
I think you're looking for a motion on the recommendation.
I am.
So I would move that we approve staff's recommendation to increase the frequency of encampment cleanups to occur on a monthly basis.
And I do have a second. Anybody?
I will second that.
Okay, please cast your votes on that. That motion is passed unanimously. And even a monthly basis, I would think it'd be more often than monthly. That gives them.
It will.
Okay, got it. So erase monthly. Okay, so moving on, let's see what was next. We said with that substitution.
We'll bring back
Third,
what we
second,
believe.
third.
We'll bring back the intent in the final document.
Okay, because our intent was shorter.
Correct.
Okay.
Frequent.
Okay, now development, implement a community education and outreach program is our next thing.
So actually, we kind of
it's not
lumped that
that.
one in with the Internal Homeless Task Force. It's, again, a staff-driven item based on the direction we receive on this document. That outreach plan will be implemented with a lot of direction from the task force. We're going to put a separate webpage on the city's site to where you would go for looking for resources if you are experiencing homelessness, if you're a resident or business owner, and where you can find information to make sure our messaging is appropriate and that we're providing as many resources as we can to the community. This item is related to the council direction at the October 22nd meeting to establish a process to successfully advocate for legislation, funding, programming, and other tools that will assist the city in the prevention and reduction of homelessness. This item is on pages 21 and 22 of your agenda report. So basically, a large portion of this is a staff-driven, staff cost staff time only item where we will be researching options and continue to work with our county, state, and federal agencies and elected officials to advocate for funding and other resources and maintenance of local control as it relates to how we enforce our programs. In addition to regional partnerships, we would also be reaching out to all California cities to identify those who are like-minded on this issue and determine the interest in forming an advocacy group to lobby state officials. If we were successful in providing anyone outside of our region, then we could come back to the City Council and talk about further efforts. The staff work, as I mentioned, would be incorporated into our existing workloads, and there are no anticipated costs to that portion of the action plan. However, we did not receive consensus at the prior meeting related to how much, if any, the City Council would like to incorporate in-person advocacy efforts into the action item. And so we identified 3 potential options for the City Council to consider, starting basically with a completely regional option where we leverage our neighbors, our staff resources, and elected official to convene meetings in the district with our assembly member, our senator, our congressperson when they're here, even federal Senate staff when they're here, the members themselves if that ever happened, working with the county and our elected neighbors or local elected officials in neighboring cities to advocate for Vista and North County regional issues related to homelessness. If we did all of that in the district, there's not really a funding requirement that is there because all of the travel would be local. And then it expands on one and then the other. Would you like to take these efforts to Sacramento? I did some estimates in terms of just travel and costs related to that. And if each council member was to spend take two day trips to Sacramento, it costs about $1,000 a year. So there's a cost in there that we could potentially look at. And then again, on the next level, if there was an interest or it felt like there was some success that could be made by lobbying in Washington, D.C. In front of federal officials, then we could incorporate a cost to that. We did... you could also choose to potentially just set aside an amount of funds and that whatever level the council is comfortable with, this is a general fund item for any potential future advocacy trips that may be needed, and that would just allow for some flexibility if something came up that we would have a funding source set aside to allow the city council members, the mayor, whoever you deem to go and make that advocacy effort. So what we're looking for is your direction on what level of funding, if any, to include in the final strategic plan document.
Councilmember Contreras.
You know, before I get to that, I had a question regarding the develop and implement a community education and outreach program portion of it. Was there not consensus from the council to do like a street outreach program, which has been successful in other cities?
There was not.
Okay. I still think that's a good idea, but maybe in the future.
It was something that was based on the other cities where it has been successful. It was extremely high cost, and it didn't rise to the consensus level at the meeting.
All right, thank you. So I am in favor, just barely, of setting funds aside just in case something comes up and we do need to either go to the state capitol or go to Washington, D.C. But I would really implore my colleagues to exhaust all free efforts first, which means that our representatives are required to come back so that it is a free option for us if we were to take the meetings that they are asking of us, which I'm not sure... I don't know if all of us have taken the meetings that were offered to us or not. So I would just implore my colleagues to please be wise with our taxpayer money because there's no need for us to spend $1,000 here, $2,000 there when we can just meet with our representatives when they come into district.
Deputy Mayor Rigby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was in Sacramento last week, and I am very certain that there would be a lot of cities that are like-minded that we would be able to work with. So I absolutely think that's an avenue that we can go toward in trying to create, I don't know the word you used, a consortium or an advocacy group or something to that effect. That was a huge topic of discussion last week for a lot of the cities. And that goes back to what I said earlier when I was still on page 8 and y'all were on 16. And it goes a little bit to what one of our speakers said earlier. And legislative advocacy is huge because a lot of the issues that we have in the state that have caused some of the issues we have with homelessness, not all of the issues. This is such a huge problem. It's so many facets to it. There's not one thing that's going to fix everything. There's not one cause that affected everybody. Some people have one cause, some people have multiple reasons, etc. And some of the reasons, not all, but a couple, have come at us from Sacramento when the state eliminated the state mental facilities and said that it wasn't something that the state wanted to be involved in anymore. And the people who were in the state mental health facilities went home to their families who could not properly care for them, and some of them ended up on the street. The state has also eliminated some of the mandatory rehabilitation for drug and rehab use. And again, people are at home, families can't take care of them, and they're on the street. And there are so many other reasons. So a lot of this that we are dealing with as a city has filtered down to us from the state level, and we are left to clean up what we can in our community. And we're looking at help from the state to recognize some of the problems that have come from state legislation and to help us with those efforts and to fund the efforts. And there is conversation in Sacramento that they recognize, yes, this and this and this caused it, but good luck to you all. And one of the legislators said that, and good luck to you. And it's like, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I will take good luck every day. But what are you going to do to back that up for us? So I think it's very important that we have legislative advocacy and that we have honest conversations. Because even as much discussion as we have here and is out in the community and is at the coffee shop, the water cooler, unless we start having absolutely honest conversations about this issue and all the levels of it, we are never going to solve homelessness. So I think it's absolutely necessary that we do advocacy. And I do agree that we should take the opportunities, start locally. We don't have an unlimited pot of money to work with. So do everything that we can locally, but don't shut the doors if we need to go to Sacramento or that we need to go to Washington to have some conversations. So I don't know if you're looking for a particular dollar amount or if you're looking to...
Well, we had put out 0, 5, and 12.5. Obviously, if the city council wanted to look at splitting that and saying up to $5,000 if needed, or up to $2,000, or whatever the number is, then we would understand and set that aside for potential travel. These numbers were based on a contingency, an entire council making a push, so that's why they're as high as they are. But if we're just looking at potentially setting aside some money, I think anywhere between $2,000 and $5,000 is reasonable.
Okay, I'm fine with that. Hopefully we won't have to go to those extremes, going to Washington, D.C. Some have had luck with that, some have not had luck with that. But I don't want to close any avenues that are available to us to advocate on behalf of the people of our community, because I think this is a very important issue that we're struggling with. And doing this strategic plan is the city and the city council and all of our community coming together to try to do what is best for our community members that are struggling in this, and also to protect and to serve the entire community as a whole. And so we might not get it right the first time out, we might not get it right in the first iteration, but this is us having a conversation and trying to work through this. So I appreciate the people who are here tonight and those who have spoken to us. I really do appreciate very, very much hearing those perspectives. And I wish the gentleman who had ideas for us hadn't left, because I would be very interested to hear what some of his ideas were. So I hope I see him again. But thank you. I'll move on to my colleagues.
I have a question. How will, before I move on, how will we determine if somebody thinks they should go to Sacramento? Personally, they think they need to go. How will we determine that?
Well, I think that with a dedicated legislative advocacy effort towards issues surrounding homelessness, it's very likely that staff is going to bring back to you kind of our own quasi-platform of ideas and recommendations for the City Council to consider, you know, looking at Propositions 47 and 57, looking at some of the mental health and substance abuse issues that are going on. And items related to that would be where this potential money, if the City Council chooses to set aside some for it, would be for either a subcommittee of yourselves or perhaps the mayor or whoever it is that is determined that's going to go advocate on behalf of the city of Vista on that issue. If someone has their own singular issue that they want to take up that's not a part of the City Council majority item, that's what we have. The City Council has their special funding funds that are set aside each year for those kind of specific issues.
But this is not something just one person could decide. I need to go to Sacramento, and I need to.
No, we would need the councils. The council would need to support that.
Of all of ours. Okay. All right. Okay. Councilmember Franklin.
Yeah, I was just going to say we already have an appropriated funding source. If one of us wants to go discuss an issue in Sacramento, we've got our, what is it, $2,500 that we can do that with. So I'm actually not in favor of appropriating any money for council travel, because I think if we want to participate in these efforts, we've already got that money appropriated. We don't need to reappropriate it. What I would like to suggest, and what I have suggested that I think was part of the genesis of this, is I'd like to see the City of Vista, out of our coming year-end fund balance, I'd like to see us set aside $20,000. And I would like to find 4 other cities that would do the same, that agree with us. And I would like to form an advocacy organization that is expressly committed to the repeal or significant reform of AB 109, Props 47, and Props 57, those 3 items. We could make an infinite number of things that we want to fix in Sacramento, but if we limit it to those 3 things, then I think we'll find greater ability to bring others on and find agreement about the purpose. If we got 5 cities to commit $20,000 apiece, then we'd have an initial $100,000 to work with. I'm sure we could find more cities that would want to join us, and we could probably quickly organize a few $100,000 to hire someone who knows. And one of the powerful things about going to Sacramento is, you know, the assembly person from Bakersfield probably doesn't have a particular interest in meeting with the council persons from Vista. However, when we travel in a group with the council person from Bakersfield, we have the opportunity to get in front of that assembly person, and they have the opportunity to get in front of our assembly person. In communicating with the legislature, there is strength in numbers. For many years, I was on the receiving end of those meetings. I know exactly how it works. It is important to make a concerted effort. It is also important to have a clear policy objective and to assist legislators in understanding what the pathway is to achieve that policy objective. It's not enough to say you want to repeal something. You need to draft language. You need to give it to them. You need to help them do the hard work, not only of crafting the proposal, but also of communicating with their colleagues. This is a very important function, often overlooked by the public. Members of the legislature or of Congress do not have the time to visit with each of their colleagues about each of the ideas that are important. They may not have time to visit with each of their colleagues about each of the ideas that are important to them. That is, if you can find agreement on a particular issue, you need to go out and win agreement amongst enough legislators to find agreement, to get something passed. Also, we need to work with the governor's office or potentially propose language for a ballot item that would allow the voters to speak again on these issues and be able to communicate with voters what the pitfalls of these 3 items have been. I don't suggest expending the $20,000 until we've located the other 4 cities. I would approach somebody capable and qualified to do this work. I would let them know about our intent, and I would ask them to find the commitment of the 4 other cities as well. And once they've unlocked all the commitments of all the 5 cities, then funding could be released. and work could begin, and they could begin to solicit others with the initial seed funding. I don't want to reinvent the wheel, and I do not want to go it alone. I want to band with, what are there, 400 and some chartered cities in California? 125, okay. So let's find 20 of them or 30 of them that want to go in with us. Maybe we only need $10,000 per city to have a quality effort. But let's join with the other cities that are like-minded. We can start with, San Marcos next door, and Escondido, I think, would maybe join us. We can ask Carlsbad. I don't know if they go with us. But we can start with our surrounding communities. I bet the County of San Diego would join with us. This is just an idea that makes sense. We don't probably all 5 of us need to go. 1 or 2 of us could participate in these efforts, and if we choose to participate, then we can use our existing appropriated funds. We don't need to appropriate more funds for it. I would make a motion that we're expressing formally to staff our preference that in this year's year-end fund balance, if there's sufficient funding, that it would be a priority of the council to find the up to $20,000 to put toward this legislative advocacy agenda, that we would begin immediately to communicate this idea with individuals capable of doing the work so that they could begin to lay the groundwork and assist us to find the other cities willing to join us, and we could work right now towards building this organization. I think that's a smart way to work towards, and if we limit it to those 3 advocacy items and we don't let it grow bigger than that, then it'll be easy to find agreement. If we make a Christmas tree out of all the things that we'd like to see Sacramento do, it'll be very difficult to win agreement and bring people on. So that's the motion that I'm making.
I guess my only thing about that is that on these funds is that, like, some people use their $2,500 that they have to do things locally. I know that Karina, Councilmember Contreras, has sit town halls, and she uses that for those and for like a interpreter and things. And so then that kind of limits so that she couldn't do. So I would think that I think I'd leave this in here, and maybe we never use it, but it would be there to use. And the $20,000, I don't know that was even an idea that was in here, and I guess I'll listen to see what everybody else has to say on that. So, Councilmember Green.
So I also would be okay with allocating funds. Just to make sure that I'm clear on this, we're saying that we want to allocate funds per council person to go to the state and possibly DC if something arises, to advocate strictly on behalf of homelessness, right? This isn't
correct. And
whatever issue comes up. This is just homelessness, right?
This specific recommendation is, and this was based on kind of, there was discussion about we need to go to Sacramento, we need to go to DC, but not a real clear consensus. So staff put this recommendation together just to give you some of the parameters. What we heard in discussions after we published the agenda was maybe we just put aside some funds for some related travel to this, but not specify that it's for X person to go to Y place, but that we would come back before the council if there was a need to use it in this specific scenario.
Yeah, and I really don't see much need for a DC trip at the $2,500 per person cost, but I think $1,000 per person, 2 days, that would inevitably afford 5 trips for a particular person to go advocate on our behalf. And I do understand, I get that we do have local assembly members and senators and things like that, and I've spoken with both of them who have wanted to meet with me, and some things we just don't agree on, and a lot of times it turns into more of a debate than a conversation. And I think that sometimes going to Sacramento and finding other like-minded people on other issues, and a lot of issues we agree on 100%, but other issues I get that you may need some outside advocacy. So I would be okay with capping that to $5,000. As far as the advocacy group that Councilmember Franklin talked about, I don't know that it would be part of our strategic plan to address homelessness per se.
So if it was narrowed to items related to homelessness, then it could be something that's incorporated.
And all of those ABs and SBs that you stated were all homelessness based?
They had some of the consequences of those propositions and laws have attributed to the homelessness issues. But I would also like to point out that one of the things we could start with, again, is reaching out, whether it's with a letter under the mayor's signature, that could go to all cities. We have email addresses for all cities and said, this is what we're looking at. Are you interested? See where we're going and build from there. that would be a not very hard task for staff to undertake, and then let you know what we're seeing from the statewide, because one of the things that's very difficult in California is finding something that everyone can agree on.
Yeah, of course.
So while we may have a lot of interest in North County or in San Diego County, there's a lot of other counties. So if we put the feelers out there, and maybe you get a handful of states, but they are geographically diverse, that might be something that's worth discussing. We could bring that information back to you and recommend next steps.
Yeah, and I mean, from an advocacy group standpoint, I don't know that I would. I mean, I get that we don't want to say everything that we disagree with per se with Sacramento, because there's a lot. But I would think if we have other cities that we work with, that there are some other, SBs and ABs that put unrealistic guidelines and unreasonable timeframes on us without any expectation or instruction per se of how we're supposed to attain those particular laws that are made. So, I mean, having additional cities kind of say, hey, Sacramento, you gave us this law and you want us to recycle this much by this date. How are you expecting, would be kind of good. I don't know why we haven't. So I think starting with a letter to say, hey, is there any interest forming? And then just know that as a council, I mean, there is power in numbers. And I think we would all agree that if we could have a coalition of cities banging down the door per se to say, hey, we want to have more options of how to address our issues as opposed to just this one particular set, that would definitely be beneficial. So in the future, I'd definitely be willing to look at something for that aspect. But yes, I do agree with up to $5,000 on this particular fund.
Oh, sorry, Councilmember Franklin. I wasn't sleeping. I was just.
I don't remember. It was a year or two ago in our goal-setting session that I suggested that we move homelessness from being a sub-item of eliminating blight or cleanliness to be its own item. We elevated it to one of our top-level goals. My core in doing this, having been a resident and watching over the last 10 years, the city of Vista has not changed its approach to how and we are now changing our approach, but we have not had substantive changes in our policies towards the homeless. And we have seen, as was noted, an explosion of the homelessness problem. We have seen the hepatitis outbreaks. We have seen tens of thousands of people occupy the streets of San Diego, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. Something has happened. It is not a problem unique to Vista. It is not a problem unique to San Francisco. The issue is with Sacramento. The issue is with broken state laws that are creating and exacerbating this problem. The issue is with the abolishment of the drug court system that allowed deferment of prison in exchange for mandatory treatment for drug abuse. The state of California and its legislative apparatus is driving this problem. It is devastating the streets of our cities. And what I wanted to address, chief among all of the drivers of these problems, is the policy that is fundamentally broken, that underlies and causes or drives this problem. So I don't view this as incidental to our homelessness plan. I view it as absolutely the fundamental core of our approach. This could not be more important. And I'm begging for not even $20,000 to be pulled away from another priority. I'm begging for $20,000 to be preferred as a funding source from an excessive balance at the year end. I don't think that's too much. We don't need any more slush funds for travel to Sacramento. That's not why I put this item forward. We have money, and council members can allocate it accordingly to their own priorities. We all have to live within a budget. If it's important to you to use that money, otherwise, as we have other appropriate uses, the council can vote later to authorize travel out of general fund. If we want to send 2 or 3 or more council members, we can have that vote later. It is critical that we act as leaders in our state and we stand up on particularly these 3 issues. I'm sure there are more, But these three issues in particular, we need to be leaders. Our residents are asking us to do something about it, and we know, and we have deep frustration when we speak with our city manager and when we speak with our sheriff's captain and when we speak with our cops deputies that are the front line of this problem. We have deep, deep frustration when we are told that the Sacramento and the laws of the state are driving these problems and they are binding our hands in every reasonable attempt to solve them. It is incumbent upon us to be leaders on behalf of the people we represent and do something that is bigger than our poor power as one city, one council member. We need to band together with others who think the way we think, who suffer the problems we suffer. This is of critical importance. This is the very core of what we should be doing to help solve this problem, is communicating the source of it.
And if I might make a recommendation, because I know AB 109, Prop 47, very public safety centric. If the city council, a majority of the city council supports Councilman Franklin's idea, maybe it's not part of the homeless master plan, but maybe we bring this item back as a standalone item to discuss going forward, finding like-minded cities, finding out who's interested, and if you're willing to set the $20,000 aside in the year-end fund balance, we can certainly make that happen.
Deputy Mayor Rigby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. City Manager. That's what I was going to ask. You're talking about using the year-end fund balance for this. Perhaps we could vet this, investigate it, not formalize it, but at least, let it gestate for a bit while we get to the year-end fund balance. And when we're discussing what we do with our year-end fund balance, as we do every year, have this discussion at the time and know the kind of money, what kind of money that we might need to do such a thing. We might not need $20,000. We might need more than $20,000. I don't know. I would like to see us keep this on the table, investigate it further, and then come back when we're looking at our year-end fund balance and decide at that time what to do with it and how to do with it. Because I think it is very important. And as you know, and anybody out there who's been following along, I've been beating this drum for years and years and years and years. Sacramento is driving a lot of this, things that they have done in legislation, and then they tie our hands and tell us that we can't use the tools in our toolbox that we once had to work with the problem. So it is an issue. My understanding is, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, AB 109 we can address through legislature. That was definitely bad legislation. But the propositions 47, 57, and we talk about that at Sandag at Public Safety all the time, the problems that we have with those two bills. Those were propositions by the people, so we have to go back to the people to have those repealed or something. So that would take an enormous effort and a lot of money to do that. So that would have to be information I would want to see in a feasibility study, if you will, and what we could do as a city in advocating, not just with 125 of the charter cities, but we have over 400 cities in California, incorporated cities in California. That number seems to fluctuate every year, the last couple of years. I know last week in Sacramento, nobody actually had a concrete number on how many cities we have. It was 402, 408, 430. It's over 400. Which means you're going to have over 2,000 different opinions on this item, judging by maybe our council. Yeah. But that's what I would propose. Bring it back at the time that we have our discussion on year-end fund balance, and at that time we'll have more information about what it might look like. And perhaps you could meet with staff on what you would like it to look like. How's that?
Councilmember Franklin.
I think that is literally precisely what I am proposing, stated differently perhaps. But yes, I would agree with that. What I had said is to express a preference to staff to use up to 20. And I'm a big fan of delegating the authority to staff, but giving direction and information. I'm not saying we spend 20. I'm saying we up to 20 with a proposal from staff, but that we are communicating now, well before we get to the end of the fiscal year. We are formally communicating a preference that this is a priority of the council and that it is a preference for the use of those end-of-year excess balances, that we look to do that. Obviously, until that proposal comes back to us from the city manager for our approval of how to expend those excessive balances, it's not going to be finally approved. But yeah, I would like to formally communicate the preference that it is a priority. Let's not call it a preference, but a priority, and that we expect to have the conversation when the year-end fund balance expenditure approval happens, and that we're expressing the sense of council that we would like the staff to begin doing the legwork that does not require an expenditure to communicate with other cities to find others that may be willing to join us. And I agree, it's a very big problem. It probably will take action from the voters, and perhaps we need to build the organization that will ultimately do that. But who else will do it if we won't? The legislature certainly doesn't seem intent on helping us solve this problem. So if we're not going to solve it for the people that we represent, I don't know who will. I suspect there might even be a few council members from San Francisco that think they've got a problem. They might be interested in joining us. It might not be a majority there, but I bet there's a few that don't find the circumstances there to be quite to their liking. So thank you very much. I would first or second that motion.
So regarding the allocation for potential legislative advocacy, is $5,000 a good number that you guys would like to vote on?
Should we do that or just leave it like it is and see where it goes? I mean, see what we need in the future.
Yeah,
I don't have a problem leaving it there.
I'm fine with that. And like I say, we already have $2,500 apiece for this purpose. And if we felt it's necessary for more of us to go, we could always bring that request back and authorize it by vote of the council later.
Right.
So in terms of inclusion in the final plan, we're going to basically pursue the efforts at the local level. We're not going to specifically related to an immediate advocacy with our regional counterparts in district meetings. We're not going to set aside funds specifically for travel related to this, and staff will be doing some investigative work related to the issues related to AB 109 specifically, as in addition to Props 47 and 57, so that as we get closer to closing our fiscal year books and understanding year-end fund balance, we can bring an update to the council for consideration.
So we're not leaving any money there then, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we're expending no money at this time.
Spending no money at this time. We're not setting anything aside. Okay.
But I would like to, because we do have our monies that we could use for our travel, I wouldn't want to say that we can't use that for advocacy. And then if something comes up and we need more advocacy than that, or we have multiple meetings that we need to go to, as was stated, it's on the table that we can come back and vote to discuss further funding.
Yes.
But the amounts that we have already for our travel budget can be used for this purpose as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, everybody? So did one of you make a motion?
Do we need a motion?
Yeah, we're making.
Yes, please.
Might as well. Do you want to be the maker or do you want to be the
Okay.
seconder?
I'll be the maker.
Okay, I'll second your motion.
Okay.
What is it?
So the motion is that we do not allocate directly funding for advocacy, but in the event we need to increase our budget, we can come back for that.
Correct, and I don't
discussion.
think that needs to be part of the motion. If I may, the recommendation in the action plan, you would be accepting the staff recommendation, but with zero funds set aside for travel.
Okay.
With an emphasis on investigation of what it would take from a state level to address AB 109, Prop 47, Prop 57, those issues related, so that we can return to the council with more information. And the timing probably is important to us because it relates to our year-end fund balance, but as it relates to the strategic plan, we're in an investigation mode.
And I would add, at a minimum, that we're asking the staff to do in a preliminary basis is to author and bring back to us a letter that we're going to expect to be sent to the 400 plus cities and what do we have, 90 or 100 counties?
There's 57 counties, 58 counties if you count San Francisco, and 482 cities.
There you go. Well, I'd like to send a letter to all those folks explaining what our intent is and asking which of those municipalities has a preliminary level of interest in receiving a proposal if we had 30, 40, 100 letters from cities that said, yes, we're interested in receiving a proposal, then we could go to a few folks that have the capabilities that would be needed, and we could say, look, we've got interest from cities to join this. You just need to put it together. The funding will come. I think that's a smart way to do it.
And this is homeless issues.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the AB 109, Prop 47, and Prop 57, repeal or significant reform.
Right.
Okay.
Do you need me to restate that?
No.
Okay. Okay.
So a motion and a second. And
Did you get that, Madam City Clerk? You did. Okay. Okay.
Councilmember Green.
Yeah, I just had a quick clarification question because I want to make sure I understand the motion before I vote on it. So what I'm hearing is that we're going to leave the verbiage of all three of these line items, but we're going to remove the at the end where it says general fund cost $1,000 per person. The bottom one, we're going to remove general fund cost $2,500 per person, and we're not adding the advocacy platform in this particular motion. We're just saying we're voting on this and we're taking out the money aspect of it. That's something we're doing later, right?
So
the vote is one thing.
It is one thing, and to clarify and streamline the final strategic plan, I'm going to go to Sacramento and go to DC out of the action items that are listed as
So you're just going to list just number one will be listed there?
Correct.
Okay.
With the other items we've discussed
We're going to remove number 2 and 3
advocacy
altogether.
Investigation. Yes.
Okay.
And the advocacy that Councilman Franklin brought up originally, we
Will
will
be
take care
included.
of separately outside of this plan. And pursue, but take care of separately outside of the homeless master plan.
Yes.
I actually strenuously object to the idea of removing this advocacy and the investigation of it from this plan. When we go back to the voters that we represent, I would like to be able to tell them, because we have been telling them, it's not our fault, it's the state. Well, then what I would ask if I were them, what are you doing to communicate? I think it is absolutely germane and relevant to the homelessness master plan. I think that this effort, even if it's only an explanation of that which Ms. Zimmerman just recited, I think it should be included in the homelessness master plan so that any individual that reads this master plan knows that this is part of the whole approach to how we solve this problem. I think that is of paramount importance, and I would ask that we include it as part of the motion, that it be part of the homelessness master plan.
I think one of the things I heard, and I'm not an expert, but the AB 109 and decriminalizing, the higher level offenses, I don't know how aligned that is with the homeless master plan that we're doing tonight. So that's why we've heard that you want to go forward with this, and I understand that. We will pursue that from the staff level. I just don't know how tight that correlation is to the homeless situation. That's all.
We've all agreed in broad terms that it is directly correlated, that it is directly an impetus for homelessness in our community. If you want to be less specific in the language of our specific advocacy, you have direction. You're getting direction in this motion. You know what the basic advocacy items are. If you want to leave that language vague in the plan itself, I would be fine with that, and we come back as a subsequent motion or action of the council to give the specific policy definition. However, I want the item to be included in the homelessness master plan and not to be separated out from it, because this was the core of why I felt a homelessness master plan was necessary, not only to attempt to treat the solutions of the problem, but to attempt to treat the causes of the symptoms.
So how would you word that?
So if I could clarify my motion then, Madam Mayor, if that's okay? Sure. So I agree that advocacy has to be part of the strategic plan. We can't leave it out. Advocacy on various levels, local, state, and federal, we can't eliminate any of those possibilities because it's all relevant. Advocacy not just for AB 109 and Props 47 and 57, which the consequences of those particular legislative actions have created some of the issues, some of the big issues that we're dealing with here. And there have been other legislative actions that have contributed to this. So I wouldn't want to specifically identify some and leave out others, because I don't know the names of all the others that we deal with all the time. So my motion would be on this one to establish a process to successfully advocate for legislation, funding, programming, and other tools that will assist the city in the prevention and reduction of homelessness. not to include any additional funding for travel. I don't know if we need to have that in there, but I don't want to make that, I don't want it to be ambiguous that we're doing additional funding. But I think advocacy for legislation covers what we want to talk about, when we want to talk about it, and how we want to get there. And do you need to have AB 109 4757 spelled out?
No, I just said that I was willing to leave those out of the homelessness master plan. I would ask one thing, which is that you would agree to strike the word funding. I'm not seeking additional funding for anything.
Okay.
I thought you were seeking $20,000.
Funding for the advocacy, yes. Funds to solve the problems that we're talking about.
Well, it's advocacy for legislation.
What I don't want to see is I don't want to see us create a document that says we're going to go and ask for another $250,000. Look, I wish that we're going to spend $772,000. I wish we could spend all of it on, we didn't see these problems 4 or 5 years ago. Now we see these problems. Why? I wish we could just go wind the hands of the clock back. If we could spend all this money to wind the hands of the clock back to a time 5 years ago when we didn't have these problems because we didn't create them, that would be preferable in my opinion. So the words matter.
Just to clarify, I think he's requesting to strike the word funding from your original sentence, not the discussion of specific funding that we were having for travel.
Right, but I have an issue with that because if you read it, it says establish a process to successfully advocate for legislation, funding, programming, and other tools to assist the city. One of the things we've talked about tonight is not having the funding to do some of the things that we need. I'm not going to strike out that we want to successfully advocate for funding to deal with some of these issues. So my motion, I will leave stand as I read it. I think you and I are talking about two different fundings.
Well, we are talking about two different fundings.
I'm talking about funding for programs here.
No, I get that. And I am not a believer in building ever larger layers of government to solve a problem that we didn't have until we created the problem by act of government. I would just like to solve the problems again as we had once solved them with law. However, I'm going to support it. I'm just going to add it with my verbal comments that's where I'm at on that. I don't want to go lobby for bigger and better government programs to solve the problem that government has created. I just want to go solve the problem.
I don't think that asking for funding to help with the problems here is creating another government program. It's helping us implement programs that we've been mandated to do or forced to do. And also advocacy for legislation comes before the funding, which to me would indicate a priority for legislative advocacy and trying to affect some of the changes that we'd like to see affected.
We'll just have to agree to disagree on that.
Okay,
we are creating a new program and giving away $250,000 tonight. So this is very much something that's been countenanced by staff, by the council, so there are a lot of proposals for how we could just take more money and more money and more money and throw at the problem, and not a lot of how do we use logic to solve the problems. And there's a great saying about the difference between a problem and a financial problem. A problem is something that money can't fix. A financial problem is one that money can. Not all of these problems are problems that money can fix, and this is part of, in my opinion, what's broken with government is that we always look for a new way to spend money to solve problems, and it's not always exactly what's needed to solve the problem. So I'm going to still second the motion. I think somewhere in this, staff has some understanding of what we intend. At least the way Ms. Zimmerman read it all back to us sounded very good to me. If there's not a substantial change in your understanding of how you're going to implement it, staff, then I'm still seconding the motion.
I believe I have Mrs. Rigby's motion. This is also coming back to you as a final document. So if we miss something, you'll see it then.
Very well.
So can I say cast your votes?
Yep.
That motion passes with one abstention. Okay, moving on to the next thing would be secure shelter beds, up to 10, it says.
Yes, as Mayor Ritter has stated, shelter beds is next. Specific information concerning shelter beds can be located on pages 23 and 33 of the agenda report. And now for the shelter beds, the city will enter into an agreement with the Alliance for Regional Solutions, otherwise known as the Alliance, to secure up to 10 beds per night in shelters that are part of the Alliance shelter network. This agreement will involve an annual allocation of approximately $200,000 for the Alliance Shelter Network. Alliance Shelter Networks offer case management, housing navigation, and wraparound services to support graduation to stable housing and self-reliance. Again, Operation Hope is part of the Shelter Alliance as well. Evaluation metrics will include number of people assisted, beds utilized, demand level, short, medium, long-term health, housing, and employment outcomes for homeless individuals, and impact on number of chronically homeless people residing in Vista. These shelter beds are specifically, even though we do have Operation Hope, these beds are specifically for the population that is not served by Operation Hope, which includes single males and females as well. At this time, we are looking for direction, and based on previous direction received on November 12th, staff does recommend securing up to 10 shelter beds to be included in the strategic plan.
Councilmember Green.
Hello, staff. Quick question for you. In the list of available beds, there were two different providers. One had 50 beds, one had 49 beds. First question that I'm going to ask you is this $19,345 per bed. Is that both of their set prices, or do they compete with each other? Like, can we negotiate that price from $19,345, or is that a government mandated set bed price?
No, nothing's mandated. Basically, when we went to the Alliance actually runs the entire shelter network, and that's the cost to operate a bed on an annual basis.
So the Alliance has a monopoly on the shelter network and sets the prices on every single bed?
No, that's just the general. So funding goes into the Alliance, and then the Alliance distributes the funding to the other shelters.
Yeah,
and
you
that's
understand
just
my
the
question,
general.
though, right?
So that's the approximate cost for the beds. And it goes per night, so it's a per night basis. I believe one shelter was $5 more, $5 under per bed, but the approximate cost is $19,345.
But we're looking at actually procuring a bed for a year. You're saying we're going to take 10 beds for a year is what this actual proposal says, right?
Exactly.
So my question to you is, if I wanted to initially say start with a lower amount of beds and then add more beds, is there any, because it looks like there's 100 beds available. Like if there were only 10 available beds, I'm like, let's lock those 10 beds in. But if I have 100 available beds, can I start with, hey, I only want to spend $100,000 right now. The second those fill up, maybe then I buy 5 more. And if those fill up, you come back to the council and say, hey, out of our 122 unsheltered from the last point in time count, you know, we've already filled up 10 of those beds. We need more beds to offer, because if we don't have beds to offer, we can't enforce our, laws per se.
Yeah, so the reason the 10 is in there, because that's the direction that we received from council on November 12th. And that's what we presented to the Alliance, say, hey, do you happen to have 10 beds available? Because at the time, we didn't know how many we could get. So anything is negotiable at this particular time. We're not set into any type of agreement. If you want a rolling scale and see what the cost would be to secure 5 beds, or see what $100,000 can get you, we can definitely go back to the Alliance and see what we can get.
I would say, since it's a draft plan and it's kind of a working plan, that should kind of be fluid as well, because I'd hate to spend the $20,000 extra on the 10th bed and we only use 9 all year, and I got something really important to spend $20,000 on already in my year of, you know what I mean? So I want to make sure that I'm spending the money as it's needed. I'm just not throwing at it without knowing, and once again, without having the social worker check on, hey, who would actually accept these beds, who would get on the van. I mean, there's a lot of additional legwork I think that needs to be done. So I wouldn't want to just write anybody a check for $200,000 today saying, hey, we're going to fill your 10 beds immediately, because do we really know we're going to fill those 10 beds immediately? And maybe we will, but I'd like a little fluidity per se in the plan, so that we're not just arbitrarily spending $100,000 that we may or may not need to spend. We should always have at least 5 available beds for any of our homeless population that wants a bed. So if all 122 call today, we obviously have a financial problem we got to work out, but let's get there first, you know what I mean? So that's kind of my take on this particular issue.
My thought always is that I want to be sure that Vista has beds, so I want to be, and I don't mind, being flexible, but I want to be sure that if they reserve 5 for us, that other people don't take the rest of them, and then we don't have any beds. I want to make sure that there are enough beds.
We're going through the Alliance Network because that's how we work on these problems and issues is on a regional basis. The shelters are conditionally permitted in each of their cities to up to a certain capacity. So 10 total is a capacity that currently is not in each of those shelters because they don't have enough money to offer those beds. By the city providing the funding, they can now secure not only the physical infrastructure, but also the case management services, the wraparound services that go with adding more people into a shelter facility. Neither of the shelters have the number of beds operating that they are allowed to have under their permitting in their jurisdictions. And I only bring that up because some of it is a bit of an economies of scale. You have to have the kind of ratio of caseworkers and employees in the shelter. So the cost for 1 bed might be very similar to the cost for 4 or 5, and so we wouldn't want to be precluded into how we put it together. And the other thing I also want to mention is by having beds available, we can then have a full wraparound opportunity to offer not only this compassionate offer of a bed, but potentially enforce some of our laws that we're unable to under the Martin versus Boise case. Right. That is a stick, for lack of a better term, that we haven't been able to use at all because we have no beds to offer.
So just to follow up real quick on my question, on page 12 of your report here, it has the number of beds that are listed where it says 50, 49, 45. Those aren't necessarily available beds. Those are just total beds in the facility. Is that what you're saying? So it's not like they have 50 available beds. They just have 50 beds in the facility.
Correct.
Okay, so I read that wrong. I read it as if they had 50 available beds, and I'm like, why would we buy them if they got 100 waiting? Why would I? Okay, so it does make more sense possibly. And you could let us know, hey, this is how many is available by reserving. This is what's available after you reserve type deal. So.
And part of the idea of having a living document is to be evaluating this on a regular basis and saying, are we using none of our beds? Are we using all of our beds? What's the right amount? But considering our point time count has been hovering around 100 for the last couple of years, 10 didn't seem unreasonable, especially when we found out that we could make those available through the Alliance.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you for the information.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yeah, I think maybe partially lost in the conversation is that we have no beds right now. And when is the last time that we had beds? Never?
For single men, no, we've never had a bed.
So this is something that we have never done before.
That is correct.
And the proposal is, in fact, up to 10 with allowing staff the discretion to, if we can contract for 10 for the price of 2, or, they have full discretion, staff has full discretion to decide how many to achieve the best financial value with I'm going to add this, the direction from council being not to purchase more than we can utilize, but to achieve the best possible economy for the city for that which we can utilize. However you determine to do that, we delegate to you. But, I always say with every behavioral and with most policy problems, there has to be both a carrot and a stick. You referred to it as a stick. The bed is a carrot. It's something we're offering. We hope that it will be utilized. It also enables us to use an enforcement mechanism to do what we talked about earlier, which is get people to the help they need, get them off the streets, out of a chronic drug abuse situation, out of an unsanitary living condition, and into a compassionate place where they can receive the services and help that they need, a warm bed where they can get a shower, where they can get medical treatment. So this is a very important step that we're taking. It should be noted that we're not creating a new shelter here within the city. We're presently looking at other providers that are located outside the city to provide these beds on a contract basis. And this is, I think, very much a pilot project that we're going to want to come back and review in the next year and understand how these beds have been utilized. It is going to be very important that while our cops deputies are working, that these beds are available. I would like to add this as council direction. I don't think our cops deputies are out contacting the homeless in the evenings. So we talked about, sometimes they are, but we talked about whether or not we want to hold the beds until a certain time at night so that we make sure that they're available for individuals coming from Vista. So I don't want to necessarily put any binding language in, but I do kind of want to provide direction that we want the staff to prefer an arrangement that makes these beds available to individuals that are coming from our community, and that they don't wind up being a subsidy for individuals from different communities. That's important, that these funds are to serve the people of Vista.
Councilmember Contreras.
Yeah, I'm all in favor of utilizing these funds to secure up to 10 beds. You know, if we're going to be seeing an increase in encampment cleanups, as was described by Mr. Mayton, there are consequences to those cleanups. And if we don't have beds available, then our community bears the consequence of that. So it definitely is the most responsible thing that the council can do is make sure that we have beds available so that we can enforce our laws. And, you know, this was the second year I did the point-in-time count, and definitely for a second year in a row, single males, they really do not have anywhere to go, and we need to move forward with the comprehensive solution where at minimum we have a place that we can say, hey, there's a bed for you, take it, or we're going to enforce our laws. So, you know, always leading with compassion and having human-to-human communication, but just at least assuring the residents of Vista that the council is taking this seriously and at the root of the issue, because of, you know, whatever laws might be out there, we cannot enforce unless we have beds. So I am 100% in favor of making sure we are allocating our funds to address the root issue that right now is preventing us from enforcing our public camping laws.
Can I second your motion?
Oh, yeah.
Sounds great.
Okay.
You offer a motion to approve this item as proposed by staff?
I do. I offer a motion to accept staff's recommendations on this item to secure shelter beds.
Okay, please. I see no other speakers. Please cast your votes. That motion passes unanimously. That takes us actually to our last issue, full-time social worker with flex funds.
Yes. And specific information concerning the full-time social worker can be located on pages 25 and 34 of the agenda report. And as Ms. Zimmerman stated at the very beginning, that all of these programs are meant to intertwine and work together as it just kind of grows. And as Councilmember Contreras has stated, the full-time social worker, the securing shelter beds definitely will also impact the encampment cleanups as well. So with the social worker program, Vista will contract with a service provider to engage a full-time social worker with extensive experience with mental health and addiction issues. The social worker will be based in Vista and will be a part of a HOT team, which includes law enforcement, county health, human services, and other providers. The team, using trauma-informed approach, will focus on chronic homelessness and gathering data for evaluation. This recommendation will cost approximately $100,000 annually. Evaluation metrics will include impact on number of chronically homeless persons residing in Vista, the length of time persons remain homeless, number of contacts, relationships with homeless people, number of successful referrals, connections to services, number of people housed in shelters, and number of family reunifications. At this time, we are looking for direction from City Council, and based on previous direction on November 12th, staff is recommending that we secure a full-time social worker with flex funds.
Whoa, everybody's lit up here. So we'll start with Councilmember Franklin.
I want to make sure, because we've said repeatedly, we've emphasized the importance of collecting information. We really don't, and we've had the public come forward. We've heard from so many folks that there are so many different drivers of homelessness. I know I certainly don't have a grasp of all of the problems. I don't believe we as an organization, the city, begin to have an understanding of the individual drivers of the 125 people who are chronically homeless on our streets, or even of some of the larger community. The idea of having a social worker is to engage on a one-on-one level. I would think first with the 125 people who are chronically homeless, and to develop firsthand knowledge of the drivers of homelessness in their lives. What I would like to see in compliance with state and federal law is as much anonymized data. We don't need to know anybody's name or anything that's particularly identifying about them, but I would like, in addition to the numbers that Ms. Lee offered as statistics that we're going to collect as a baseline of information, I would like to see as much information that is relevant without being personally identifiable as possible to inform the leadership of this city at the staff level and the council, so that we could begin to understand what the individual drivers are for some of the individuals who live in our community and are suffering from homelessness. That understanding of individual level problems, and it could be, you know, let me tell you about 3 individuals, and I'm not going to give you their names, but let me tell you about 3 people and their common experience. Let me tell you about another 4 people and their common experience. But I would like to see some of that granular information about the individual suffering homelessness, so that we can begin to understand at a granular level, at a personal level, what is driving homelessness in our community. I think that's very important, and that goes way beyond these, you know, a spreadsheet with 10 different, you know, how many connections did you make? That gives me a number I can't do much with. It doesn't allow me to have much oversight as a policymaker, but if I can hear some of the stories that are anonymized, that are relevant to a few individuals, because I'm sure there's at least a few individuals that share common drivers. If that information can be shared with us, I think it would be incredibly helpful. I think it would be illuminating not only to the council, but also to the public, and I think it's a conversation that's worth having for our community, and that's what I'm asking for this social worker to do, is to really help us understand at an individual level what the problem is. And then we can come back a year from now so much better armed with information and understanding, so that we can renew this plan and authorize new plans and new pilots and tweak ones that didn't work or end ones that were total failures, but so that we can truly be educated. I mean, education has got to be part of this. That's really what I want to see, in addition to obviously their core function of being able to connect each of the individuals that they contact with the services that might help them make their way out of homelessness or solve the problems that they need. So I think it's an equal mission of connecting homeless with the services they need, health services and other services, as well as educating all of us here at the city. And if we're going to hire somebody who refuses to share that information with us, other than here's 10 different metrics, then I'd be deeply disappointed. So any thoughts on that the staff can offer, and whether any of that's possible, and whether we can really try to develop an understanding, or whether it's going to be siloed and not shared, because that's important.
I'm not familiar with any of the specific privacy laws that's related to that, but if a person wanted to share their story, I don't see why we wouldn't take that information, strip the distinguishing factors out of it, and include it. There is a regional, for the entire county uses a master, it's actually called a homeless master information system called HMIS, so that when our social worker or any of our law enforcement providers that are able to access the system puts in information about somebody and you know their name and their social security number, it populates it so that if that person is seen at a clinic in San Marcos or Escondido, all of that information is being populated about the system. So that's one of the things that we're going to really take advantage of as well, is making sure that the people who are experiencing homelessness in Vista are in the system, that they are, the contacts are being tracked, and that we understand what types of services have been offered, what has been successful, and what hasn't been successful. But there will be reporting metrics back to the City Council on all of these items, because it's important for us to know.
I'd like to go so far as to say I'd like to have the social worker personally, not through an intermediary, I'd like to have them personally come and give what information they lawfully can in compliance with state and federal law. I'd like to have them come and report their experiences so that we can personally understand. We're authorizing this position. We want to understand as policymakers what information they are uptaking and how our efforts are working in their estimation. And, you know, detractors are going to say, I'm trying to get somebody's personal information. I don't want anybody's personal information. I don't want to identify anybody. But they certainly could explain in an anonymous way what they're seeing. They could provide the analogies that are relevant, that are not identifiable, to help us better understand the problem as they see it. That's what I'm looking for, and I'd like to have a commitment that this individual, at least twice a year, if not quarterly, is going to come before us and talk with us about their experiences.
That deliverable could be included in the RFP.
Deputy Mayor Rigby.
The annual cost of approximately $100,000, how will that be allocated?
So we're going to issue an RFP. There are a number of social service providers, the county and others, that have social workers on staff that are typically contracted out to help other communities with things like this. We know that this is the going rate based on discussions with other cities, but basically we're going to have them provide us, again, a response to our request for proposals, and they'll include their fees in there. It may not be the main driver of who we select, but it will be a part of the negotiation to make sure that it's a fair and reasonable cost. So it'll be allocated likely when we'll set up what the deliverables are on a monthly basis, and then they will submit an invoice. But we would set the money aside out of our funding sources for this purpose based on the estimate we have from other communities.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Green.
All right, so basically just two quick questions. First question is, and I guess you don't know this because you're going to put an RFP out for the social worker, but I was thinking, where's their office located at?
We would want them to be physically located in Vista.
Yeah.
We have some issues with state contracting and other laws about potentially housing them in our facility, but we would like them to be located in Vista, and we'll hopefully be able to work that out.
That's what I was hoping for, somebody who's local here. And then the other thing is, when I'm looking at your internal homelessness task force, when I look at the list of people who are on it, I noticed that the social worker is not on it, and I'm thinking it would be pretty beneficial to have the social worker on the internal homeless task force.
Good catch. We'll include them.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Contreras.
Yeah, I'm 100% in favor of allocating funds for a full-time social worker. My question has to do with the flux funds. Is council going to be provided a list, like an itemized list, regarding how the flex funds are utilized? Is there anything like that?
We could. Typically they're set aside so that if the social worker comes into contact with someone who's ready to go into maybe a substance use program or shelter beds available, but we don't have a way to transport it, the funds would be available for a taxi voucher or to get a transportation. It's not just it's not like the prevention flex funds in that sense. But if we could, they will be providing to us how they're spending that money or what they want a reimbursement for, so we can definitely provide that to the council.
Yeah, I think, I don't know how my colleagues feel about that, but I definitely, this is our money, so I want to make sure that we know what it's being utilized for, and in a future discussion, that data might become relevant and or important at that time. So
it can be. We can ask for that to be included in the regular reports.
Perfect. Thank you.
Did you want to make a motion or anything?
I make a motion to accept staff's recommendation, and in addition, to have metrics, an itemized list of how the flex funds are used.
I would second that motion.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Rigby, you're next.
I would second that motion.
Okay, you're seconding the motion. Okay. Councilmember Franklin?
Did we agree to the quarterly appearance before the
I heard you say
council?
twice a year. Did you?
I'll settle for twice a year.
Great.
and 2 additional written opportunities.
I concur.
Okay, so we all set with that? Everybody cast your votes. That motion passes unanimously. Whoa, I think we're done with that item at this point. Anyway, so we're going to move on.
We just wanted, real quick, to let you know that based on the direction we received here, any modifications, we're going to update the draft plan. We're going to put it on our website and let the public know that it's out there for a 3-week period. Any comments we receive, we'll incorporate and include in the final update, and we anticipate bringing this back to the council in March for final approval.
Okay.
And thank you so much for your time.
And Mayor, as Ally mentioned earlier, I do want to thank HG Consulting, Heidi and Julie. They're the ones that put together the plan. They did all the research. They did all the interviewing, the bulk of the work. And so I do want to say thank you to them publicly.
Thank you for all of that. We appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, with that, we're going to move on to oral communications. And so I have actually 2 speakers. I have Peggy Walker and followed by Charity Singleton. Is Peggy here still? Yeah. And then after her will be Charity Singleton.
I don't think Peggy's here.
Peggy's not here? Okay, Charity, you're up.
Hey, council members, mayor, it's so nice to see you all today. And it's been a pleasure sitting through all of these different council meetings and watching this plan actually go from just pieces to one full thing. And it's incredible to see that process. If anyone else doesn't know, I am the executive director at Operation Hope North County. And we deal with, as you all know, Vista has been very supportive in our homeless shelter with families and single women. So I wanted to make that correction. We're not just families, we do serve single women. We have 11 families right now and 4 single women that are in-house. We are at full capacity. So I want to address just 2 things that were on the actual homelessness plan to just comment on those different things. The first one is the conversation about at-risk youth in education. My personal feeling on this is absolutely, John Franklin, I really agree with you when it comes to how can we change the family tree, how can we change that trajectory of our youth that are going through homelessness. But I also have to profoundly agree with Karina because we see families coming in with trauma. We go through a process of stabilization. And in that stabilization, the only thing that they can think of is what is here and now. How can I feed my family? What type of shelter can I get them because I don't have anywhere else to go? So that process and teaching them how to come out of that, how to come out of trauma and get into a place where they can accept the education. So the education that we give them is we give them counseling on financial literacy and credit repair and filling in the gaps that they may have at this point. So absolutely, I totally fundamentally agree with each piece of that is so vital. And in this next year, looking at this whole homelessness program, we as an organization have been really looking at what an alumni program would look like. All of those families have been into stable housing, we've gotten them there, now what? How can we create a place, an environment to create or address the issues of education? And so we have been putting into play a scholarship fund for our youth, specifically for those who go through our program. So I really wanted to address both of those issues of, yes, we see it on a day-to-day basis that is happening, and it is fundamentally, if we look at everything, it is that educational piece. how can we get them jobs that are higher paying by getting them some technology, some certificates, and or putting those youth through higher education. The other thing that I wanted to address is when you go and do governmental advocacy, how come I can't say that?
I don't know, but make it real quick because your time is up.
Just remember that we don't get any of those HUD funding, and so advocating for something like our program would be really helpful because we don't get that funding. So thank you so much for everything.
Okay, thank you so much. And that's our only speaker tonight. So with that, we will go on and we'll do remarks. I have my little news thing I do every meeting. And so, again, I want to wish the City of Vista a happy 57th birthday today. It's great to see how far our city has come since it was incorporated back in 1963, I want to say, right? Yeah, oh, I got the right date. Thank you to the Vista Chamber for hosting our annual State of the Community luncheon yesterday. My State of the City address and a list of the city's significant accomplishments, and there are many, for 2019 have been posted online at thecityofvista.com. This Friday, January 31st, is Fine Free Friday. That's a tongue twister almost. It's at the Vista Library. Return your library books or DVDs on the last Friday of the month, and the library will forgive your fines. And the city is encouraging residents to take San Diego Regional Allowance for Fair Housing Survey. It's called the San Diego Regional Alliance for Fair Housing Survey. The Regional Alliance is conducting the survey on behalf of participating cities, including Vista, to learn about our residents' experience with housing discrimination issues and concerns. A link to the survey is on our website, cityofvista.com, and your response is anonymous. And with that, I will go on down the road here, and I'll do my Deputy Mayor comments you have tonight.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Mayor. As I mentioned earlier, I was up in Sacramento this last week for Revenue and Taxation Policy Committee meeting and the League of California Cities meeting. And there, in the Rev and Tax, they were talking about the SB1 funding, which is the gas tax. And we thought that the fight was over with Sacramento wanting to hold our SB1 funding hostage relating to what we do with our housing. But apparently that's coming back at us again, so we're still having that fight, so that's something to keep an eye on. The census count, we did talk about the census coming up. Sacramento is anticipating we might lose a couple of congressional seats with the census count coming up, so it's really important that everybody take the census and do the census. And what I was really struck with was the comment that the number one undercounted demographic we have across the country are babies. People will fill out the census or they'll talk to the census taker at the door and they don't mention that they have a baby. They don't think that the baby counts. So I thought that was interesting. So if you have a baby, count your baby. All babies matter here. Another thing was coming at us some more drone bills. There are 3 different bills coming out of the state Senate regarding drones. One of them will have mandatory ID chips or readers that somebody in law enforcement might be able to aim at the drone and figure out who it belongs to. If we can do that, I'd be curious to know who's driving the drones over my house. So I might be talking to you about that. And another thing, Sacramento legislators are looking at mandating an aging master plan for all of the cities to implement either a standalone aging master plan to talk about their aging population and the resources that we have for them, housing programs, et cetera, or mandating that be an element in our general plan. So we're going to be looking at that again later on in the summer or the fall of this year. So those are just some of the things we talked about up in Sacramento.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, right. Councilmember Franklin.
I would just second the thanks to all the staff and our consulting team for the good work on the homelessness master plan, and to all the members of the community who came forward to share their thoughts with us about it. I thank everybody.
Councilmember Green.
So yeah, I'd also like to thank staff and our consultants who worked hard on that. And I also want to commend my council. It's a lot of work getting all of us kind of to get something like this together and to see this strategic plan to address homelessness come to fruition after all of the hours and hours and pretty much days and days and weeks and months of work is really awesome. And as a council, you hope to leave a legacy that says, hey, I care about my town and I did some really good, meaningful work. And tonight, although it was a little longer than maybe we expected, the work that we did here tonight is going to change a lot of lives. And it really does show our community that we truly care. So thank you guys so much for working so hard to do this and coming up with this plan. And lastly, after the council meeting last week, my sister, Kitty Frolander, passed away on Wednesday, January 15th. And I just want to thank my council for the love and care and support and the flowers and the letters and the phone calls and the text and all the staff and just all my friends and family who just showed up. And having such a big community love on you is huge. And to the San Diego County Sheriff's Department, it happened in San Marcos, and you guys handled it extremely professionally. You treated my family amazingly. And on our darkest day, to have somebody there who was in control and really cared about the situation was huge. So Vista, my council, my sheriff's department, and just my whole community, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. I appreciate it.
Councilmember Contreras.
As always, we have really great discussion up here, and we leave no stone unturned, which is good. And I just want to offer the community, as I usually do, if you are looking to walk about 2 to 3 miles and burn some calories, we meet up, a little group of us at Luz Duran Park every Wednesday, and we start walking by 9 a.m., and we pick up trash in the neighborhood. We usually pick about 120 gallons of trash, and it is open to everybody. So if you want to burn some calories, make Vista look nice, and get to know your neighbors a little bit, here's a spot where you can do all three at once. And you know, sometimes I have like a spot little dance that I do, so you might even be able to catch me in action. Maybe I'll bring my guitar this time. Who knows? We'll see. Have a good night, everybody, and thank you, staff. Thank you to all my colleagues.
City Manager Patrick Johnson.
Happy 57th birthday to Vista.
That's it. How about our city attorney?
Happy 57th birthday, and I'm disappointed there were no balloons on the dais.
Darn.
I am not. Not at all.
The person who is allergic to latex over here. How about our city clerk? Nothing, Assistant City Clerk, nothing? Okay, with that, I think we are adjourned at 8:47.